Chapter 24. At that moment, the chaotic energy in Hong Jun's body, which was so dense that it was almost black, had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a strand of transparent energy that was as thin as a strand of hair. This energy seemed so insignificant in the wide meridians. If one did not observe it carefully, it was very likely that they would ignore it. This transparent energy was extremely mysterious. It was similar to the energy in Luo Fan's body before he broke through. Compared to his previous body, the Khanate Taoism body that Hong Jun had obtained was like heaven and earth. The deformed body from before was forcibly transformed according to Panga's appearance. It was similar in shape, but not in spirit. In essence, it was still a Laos. It did not have any of the mysteries of the Khanate Taoism body. In terms of mysteriousness, it was not even comparable to the human form of the future. At that moment, this Khanate Taoism body, from the bottom of the cells to the skin on the surface, was in accordance with some mysterious existence. It contained an indescribable mystery. It also resonated with the entire primordial world, as if it could easily merge with the world. Hong Jun felt the very subtle connection between his body and the surrounding world. He was so excited that he could no longer control himself. He could no longer hold back his tears. He knelt down and thanked with a choked voice, "Thank you, Master, for your help." Luo Fan looked down at Hong Jun, whose body was naked and face was full of tears, and his heart was touched. It was only the beginning of the world. Almost all the Khanate gods were muddle-headed. Hong Jun actually had such a strong desire to seek Tao. It was no wonder that he could become the master of the saints and the master of heaven and earth later on. You don't have to be so polite. You only need to remember how hard you worked to obtain this innate Taoism aptitude, and then truly step into the path of seeking the Tao. Then, I won't have wasted my efforts, Luo Fan said indifferently. Hong Jun stopped crying and said firmly, "I will remember the hard work today. I will never slack off on the path of seeking Tao." "Get up," Luo Fan nodded and said. Hong Jun kowtowed and stood up. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The barrier that covered a radius of 100 miles collapsed with a loud bang. The Xiantian Yuan Qi that was blocked by the barrier surged crazily into the area within a radius of 100 miles. The innate vitality surged at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it had already rushed to the two of them. With a powerful impact, it rushed towards Luo Fan and Hong Jun. The primordial qi in the untainted land was extremely dense. Although the impact was only caused by the vacuum of the primordial qi within a radius of 100 miles, it would probably shatter steel into pieces even if it was used on it. But for Luo Fan and Hong Jun, this impact was nothing. There was naturally no need to say anything about Luo Fan. At this moment, he'd already attained the earthly, immortal Tao fruit, so this little bit of force was even unable to ruffle his clothes. Hong Jun's performance was even more exaggerated. The moment the innate Yuan Qi approached his body, the mysterious energy that was slowly circulating in his body became like a shark that smelled blood, and its circulation speed suddenly increased by more than 100 times. An unimaginably strong suction force suddenly appeared, and his body seemed to have turned into a black hole, pulling all the innate Yuan Qi that got close to him into his body. Pai pai, boom, poo, kacha. The Xiantian Yuan Qi rubbed against the ground and rolled up the mountain rocks, causing all kinds of strange sounds. As his cultivation methods circulated, more and more Xiantian Yuan Qi surged into his body. After the Xiantian Yuan Qi entered his body, it rushed straight into his meridians. In an instant, it was scattered by the mysterious energy that was circulating in his meridians and merged into his body. However, it required tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of portions of Xiantian Yuan Qi to increase the mysterious energy. If one had to use an analogy, it would be that a pillar of Xiantian Yuan Qi, the size of 2 or 3 people hugging together, could only be refined into a strand of energy the size of a strand of hair. Although Hong Jun had attained the Xiantian Taoism aptitude, he still did not have a trace of mana in his body. Naturally, he could not attain the earthly immortal Tao fruit. This was completely different from Luo Fan, who attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit at the same time as he attained the Xiantian Taoism aptitude. This was not because Luo Fan deliberately did not teach him any secrets or did something to his cultivation method. It was because with Hongjuan's current strength, it was impossible for him to attain the earthly immortal Tao fruit at the same time as he attained the Xiantian Taoism aptitude. Although Hongjun had been cultivating for hundreds of thousands of years, which was several times longer than Luo Fan's, the cultivation method he cultivated was too crude. He only knew how to absorb the chaotic qi and compress it in his body. He knew nothing about cultivation and realms at all. According to this cultivation method, the energy in his body was enough for him to attain the Xiantian Yuan Qi, but his realm was not enough for him to transcend. It was not enough for him to attain the earthly immortal Tao fruit. Luo Fan modified the cultivation method to deal with this situation. He separated the attainment of the Xiantian Yuan Qi and the attainment of the earthly immortal Tao fruit. This allowed Hongjun to make use of the energy accumulated in his body first, explode his body, and attain the true Xiantian Yuan Qi. Because this Xiantian Yuan Qi was forcibly activated under the effect of the cultivation method, there would be some flaws in Hongjuan's refinement and absorption of energy during this process. This was not a problem with the cultivation method, but with Hongjuan's realm. It was precisely because of this that when Hongjun was cultivating the cultivation method to attain the earthly immortal Tao fruit, Luo Fan set up an invisible cover to isolate the area within a radius of 100 miles from the outside world. The quality of the Xiantian Yuan Qi was more than 10 times worse than the chaotic Qi. If it was not isolated, the Xiantian Yuan Qi that swarmed toward him would seep into his body due to the flaws in his absorption and refinement of energy. Instead, it would reduce the quality of the transparent energy that was completely transformed from the pure chaotic Qi. The mysteries of the Xiantian Yuan Qi had already been explained in the previous chapter. The energy needed to construct the Xiantian Yuan Qi was naturally not little. Hongjun completely relied on the energy in his body to construct the Xiantian Yuan Qi, which consumed an extremely large amount of energy. That was why there was a trace of energy in his body at the moment. His body was so empty, and his desire for energy was so urgent. The Xiantian Yuan Qi vortex kept expanding, and the amount of Xiantian Yuan Qi that surged into his body increased exponentially. However, Hongjun felt that the emptiness in his body did not improve much. Luo Fan looked at it and shook his head slightly. He raised his hand and waved. The Xiantian Yuan Qi that was surging toward Hongjun in a frenzy suddenly condensed and compressed, forming a gray robe that covered Hongjun's body. That incomparably terrifying tearing force was instantly blocked by the gray robe. Absorbing the Xiantian Yuan Qi like this is a waste of time, and it might even affect the purity of the energy. However, you still need to find the source of the chaotic qi to replenish the energy in your body. However, this is not the time to completely replenish your energy. I'll restrain you first. When the time is right, I'll let you absorb with all your strength. After Luo Fan was done, he looked at Hongjuan's doubtful and longing eyes and said calmly. Although Hongjun felt that his body was extremely empty and that the mysterious energy yearned for the Xiantian Yuan Qi around him, he still knew that what Luo Fan said must have his reasons. He did not dare to be dissatisfied or resentful, and could only lower his head and agree. However, Luo Fan sighed in his heart. I was still too reckless. Although I obtained the Xiantian Yuan Qi, my level is still not high enough, and I can't achieve the fruit of Wei. Even if the energy in my body is replenished, I can't convert it into magic power, and it might damage my spirit. Magic power was a kind of existence formed by the gathering of the mysterious energy through the pure refinement of the soul, and finally transformed into some kind of talisman that possessed infinite power. All the conditions were met, But if one's level was not high enough to understand the key to the transformation, the mysterious energy would accumulate in one's mind and continuously attack one's spirit. It was very likely that one's spirit would collapse because of this. Chapter 25. However, fortunately, it's not irreparable. Luo Fan's expression remained unchanged, but he was relieved in his heart. If Hong Jun was just an ordinary innate god, like Pishio before he was possessed, he naturally had no way. He could only keep restraining Hong Jun and let Hong Jun continue to hone his Taoist heart and increase his realm, until his realm was enough to prove the Tao fruit. Then he would release the restraint and let him absorb energy wantonly. However, there was a big difference between Hong Jun and other innate gods. That was, he had a primordial, inextinguishable divine light. Hong Jun had decided not to refine this primordial, inextinguishable divine light, but to help it evolve into a primordial spiritual treasure. Therefore, he could not obtain the eternal essence of the primordial, inextinguishable divine light. However, this primordial, inextinguishable divine light was still primordial, inextinguishable divine light, and its essence still existed. In the process of helping the primordial, inextinguishable divine light evolve, Hong Jun's divine soul would be more and more closely connected with the inextinguishable divine light. When the connection was close to a certain extent, his divine soul would be protected by the inextinguishable divine light. Although it was not as eternal as refining the inextinguishable divine light, it would not be a problem for his divine soul to withstand the impact of the energy in his body. Hong Jun, my disciple, I will refine a celestial artifact for you to travel. You can take this opportunity to refine the primordial, inextinguishable divine light. Maybe you will gain something. Luo Fan made up his mind and said to Hong Jun lightly, "Yes, master." Hong Jun did not know what a celestial artifact was, but he still said quickly. After Luo Fan finished speaking, he did not care about Hong Jun anymore. At the beginning of the untainted land, even the chaotic energy had not completely evolved into the innate energy. Therefore, everything in the world contained some chaotic essence. Even the most inconspicuous sand and stones were priceless treasures in the later generations. Just like where Luo Fan and Hong Jun were at this time, a stone and a handful of sand were all the best materials for refining supreme celestial artifacts. In this untainted land, there was no need to worry about materials at all. Luo Fan carefully sensed the surroundings with his perception, then raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. The ground began to rumble and shake. 10 miles to the right of him, 100 miles in diameter, giant rock slowly rose from the ground. It shook a few times to shake off the dirt and stones on its surface, then slowly flew up to 1,000 feet above his head. 1/10 of this huge rock was above the ground. After being battered by wind and rain, its original color had been covered, but it was now a grayish-brown color. 90% of the lower part was buried in the ground. It didn't experience wind and rain, so it still maintained its original color. At this moment, it was flickering with an earthy yellow radiance. It was a huge piece of earth element essence. In the future, a fingernail-sized piece of earth essence was enough to upgrade a flying sword from the lowest grade to the highest grade. But right now, there was such a huge piece here. Luo Fan had no idea how precious the 5th earth essence was. His knowledge of cultivation came from Pangu's primordial spirit, which integrated the countless thoughts of his later generations, and then connected it with Pangu's understanding and the reality of the primordial world. What he knew was only the nature of the earth element essence. This piece of 5th earth essence contains the earth energy, which is enough to withstand the art of infinite void palace. Luo Fan thought to himself as he studied the exaggerated 5th earth essence. The 5th earth essence was the essence of the earth. It contained an immeasurable amount of earth energy, as well as a wisp of divine light at the beginning of the world. It was extremely profound. The art of infinite void palace was a spell that could open up a temporary abode. By inserting it into a certain material, a vast space could be opened up within the material, providing a place for cultivators to live and cultivate. If it was cultivated to its peak, it would be enough to open up a boundless minor kiliocosm. Luo Fan frowned slightly. The mantra of the art of infinite void palace flashed in his mind, and his mind entered a state of extreme calmness. The Dharma power in his body that had already condensed into an Earth Immortal's Tao fruit suddenly separated into a sesame-sized ball, then began to circulate rapidly along his meridians in a mysterious path. With each cycle, the sesame-sized ball of Dharma power would undergo a slight change. After 81 cycles, the ball of Dharma power had turned from grayish-brown to a sacred golden color, and its size had expanded by over 1,000 times. One could even see countless three-dimensional talismans flashing crazily within it. It was full of mystery and profoundness. He raised his right hand and pointed at the fifth earth essence in the air. The ball of golden light shot out from his right index finger, elongating as soon as it came into contact with the wind. In just a blink of an eye, it expanded by over 10,000 times, reaching a diameter of over 100 meters. Countless talismans kept flashing and swimming within the ball of light. The entire ball of light looked as if it was weaved from tiny threads that were as thin as hair, densely packed together. Wu Qi reckoned that there were at least hundreds of millions of them. The ball of light soared up into the sky, then plunged into the fifth earth essence without any hindrance. After the golden light plunged into the fifth earth essence, it immediately burst into a dazzling golden light. Countless three-dimensional talismans were swimming and shuttling on the surface of the fifth earth essence. Slowly, the fifth earth essence began to melt. During the melting process, countless impurities were turned into black gas and expelled out. It caused a thick layer of black gas to form above the fifth earth essence, and its size was constantly shrinking. After several tens of breaths, the size of the fifth earth essence had shrunk by half. The black mist formed by the impurities had already condensed into a gray cloud that was around 10 acres in size in the air over 10,000 feet above. Luo Fan raised his head and looked at the countless golden talismans, then at the ball of yellowish liquid that had melted and shrunk to 50 meters in diameter. His eyes flickered with countless rays of light, while the mantra of the everlasting void palace echoed in his mind. Open. Suddenly, he let out a loud cry. The ball of yellowish liquid above him abruptly burst into a golden light that was 10 times stronger than before. The millions of golden talismans burst out with endless power, causing the void to twist slightly. In an instant, the ball of yellowish liquid was stretched and fixed into a square-shaped palace that measured 100 meters on each side. At the same time, the mist formed by the impurities was dispersed in an instant, and a purple light that measured 1 acre broke through the void and condensed in the space. Just in time, Luo Fan laughed and pointed his finger upward. Raising his hand and pointing upwards, a speck of magic power that was as small as a speck of dust rushed out from his right index finger. It grew with the wind and turned into a grayish-brown, 10 feet tall, three-dimensional talisman in the shape of Buzhou Mountain that was composed of incomparably complicated lines. It was one of Luo Fan's magic power units. The three-dimensional talisman, shaped like Buzhou Mountain, soared up into the sky, bypassing the square-shaped palace that measured 100 meters on each side. It came to a height of 10,000 feet and devoured the ball of purple light, then descended and sank into the square-shaped palace. After devouring the purple light, the originally grayish-brown, three-dimensional talisman turned dark purple, making it look extremely noble. The moment the dark purple talisman sank into the square-shaped palace, rays of light flickered, and countless lightning bolts burst out from the depths of the palace, instantly wrapping up the entire palace, making it look as if the palace was shackled by countless lightning chains. Crackling sounds of explosions rang out, and the surrounding innate energy was instantly pushed away, creating a vacuum of innate energy that could be seen with the naked eye. Then, amidst the endless lightning bolts, the square-shaped palace shrank rapidly. The lightning bolts grew weaker and weaker, and the square-shaped palace became smaller and smaller. When all the lightning bolts disappeared, the square-shaped palace had shrunk from its original 100 meters on each side to the size of a fist. Luo Fan raised his hand and beckoned, and the fist-sized square-shaped palace fell into his palm. I didn't expect to be able to summon the earth element divine thunder to further refine it. What a pleasant surprise. Luo Fan caressed the square-shaped palace, feeling secretly delighted. The lightning that condensed 10,000 feet above the void was the earth element divine thunder summoned from the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer tens of thousands of miles above. With the refinement of the earth element divine thunder, the grade of the palace would be improved by at least one level. Chapter 26. Lowering his head to take a closer look, the palace looked very simple and unadorned. There weren't many decorations, and it could even be considered simple. However, there was a magnificent atmosphere coming from it, and one could tell that the palace was full of mysteries. There was a pair of couplets on both sides of the palace's main entrance. The words used were the same complicated words used for the nameless technique. The right side of the couplet read, Taoist Universe Void Body. The left side read, Heaven and Earth Sea True Mystery. Horizontal, Infinite Void. Luo Fan sighed to himself. Even though the Infinite Void Palace technique was a technique perfected by his thoughts, he still felt that the palace in his hand was a little unbelievable. While Luo Fan was refining the Infinite Void Palace, Hongjun had already started to refine the connate inextinguishable spiritual light. He sat down cross-legged and raised his hand to point diagonally upwards. The connate inextinguishable spiritual light that had been floating and rotating in his lower abdomen since he had obtained the connate Taoism aptitude gradually elongated. It slowly rushed out of his right hand along his meridians and condensed into a basketball-sized gray ball of light in midair. It was covered in silk-like talismans. Hongjun's eyes flashed with a determined light. He reached out and grabbed. The incomparably dense talismans on the surface of the gray ball of light instantly collapsed, turning into a huge amount of chaotic energy. As he breathed, it entered his body through his two nostrils. After the talismans on the surface of the connate inextinguishable spiritual light collapsed, it suddenly expanded from the size of a basketball to 10 times its original size. The chaotic energy that flowed into Hongjun's body was originally emitted from his body, so was naturally not within the range of Luo Fan's restriction. After such a huge amount of chaotic energy entered his body, Hongjun silently recited the incantation to help the innate inextinguishable spirit light evolve into a primordial spirit treasure, and the transparent energy in his body began to flow rapidly according to the incantation. As the energy flowed through his body, the primal chaos energy was constantly being broken apart. Then, it was completely devoured by the mysterious energy. After devouring all the chaotic energy, the energy that was originally as thin as 2 or 3 strands of hair suddenly doubled. Although it was still so insignificant in the meridians, it was already a huge improvement. When the energy doubled, Hongjun suddenly felt a slight pain in his soul, as if there was an invisible force attacking his soul. He was slightly shocked. In his confusion, he seemed to understand why his master wanted to restrain him. He couldn't help but feel even more grateful to Luo Fan. The transparent energy swallowed the primal chi. This was not the effect of the cultivation technique, but the instinct of the energy. It was the instinct of a high-level energy to suppress a low-level energy. Hongjun raised his hand and pointed. Streams of mysterious energy rushed out of his finger and quickly shrank, twisting and entangling. In the blink of an eye, they condensed into transparent, three-dimensional talismans that were so complicated that it made people dizzy. They continuously imprinted into the spiritual light above. This time, Hongjun's movements were more than 10 times smoother than last time. Those three-dimensional talismans were endless, almost forming an arc that led straight to the place where the inextinguishable spirit light was. The 365 three-dimensional talismans were completed in one go. In just a few breaths, They were completely imprinted into the inextinguishable spiritual light. As the 365 three-dimensional talismans were imprinted, the inextinguishable spiritual light suddenly condensed and rapidly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it shrank into a ball the size of a fist. It was gray and light flowed on its surface. There were countless talismans on its surface, constantly changing. Almost every moment, there were hundreds of millions of talismans changing. It looked like a cocoon wrapped in thick, transparent threads. The cocoon trembled slightly. It suddenly expanded and contracted like a beating heart. It also seemed like there was something growing inside. Hong Jun didn't show any signs of strain on his face. His eyes were shining, and it was obvious that he was very happy and excited. The mysterious energy in his body had been reduced by half, and the amount had returned to what it was at the beginning. At this moment, the strange force that ceaselessly attacked his soul had already vanished without a trace, and it caused him to feel relaxed and refreshed. Suddenly, a suction force appeared between his brows, but it was only effective on the cocoon. The cocoon was quickly pulled into the space between his eyebrows, and it was sucked into it. After the cocoon entered Hong Jun's body, it rushed into his sea of consciousness through a mysterious point. Hong Jun's sea of consciousness had expanded by 30 times. It didn't look like a small room like before. Instead, it looked like a huge football field. His soul was that of a thin and frail young man with a firm temperament. He was in the middle of the sea of consciousness. He was floating with his eyes closed. After the inextinguishable spiritual light rushed into the sea of consciousness, it flew directly to the top of his soul and stopped there. With the arrival of the inextinguishable spiritual light, Hong Jun felt a confused spiritual sense appear in his perception. This spiritual sense was extremely simple. It didn't have any self-consciousness or clear thoughts. It could only declare its existence to everything that could sense it, and declare that it wasn't a dead thing. In an instant, a wave of understanding appeared in Hong Jun's mind. This is the spiritual sense of the inextinguishable spiritual light. In order to help the inextinguishable spiritual light evolve into a primordial spiritual treasure, I must cultivate and strengthen this spiritual sense. With this wave of understanding, all the difficult parts of the incantation that Luo Fan taught him were suddenly understood. In an instant, he completely grasped the essence of the incantation. With a slight change in his mind, the mantra became even more agile. Wisps of grayish mist rose from the top of his soul, merging into the inextinguishable spirit light without leaving a single drop. As the smoke entered, the confused spiritual sense transmitted an extremely joyful feeling into his soul. At the same time, he felt that his connection with the inextinguishable spiritual light was a little closer. The trace of disharmony that he had after transforming into a primordial Taoism aptitude instantly disappeared, and his mind became extremely refreshed. Hong Jun was overjoyed. He opened his eyes to thank Luo Fan, but found that Luo Fan had disappeared. There was only a square palace the size of a fist floating 10 feet above the ground in front of him. Wuji Void Palace? This must be a means of transportation refined by master. Hong Jun looked at the square palace and guessed in his heart. At this moment, Luo Fan had already entered the Wuji Void Palace. The interior of the Wuji Void Palace was extremely vast, with a circumference of 10,000 miles. Entering this place was like entering another space, another world. At the edge of this space, a layer of earthy yellow light was like a heavenly wall, enveloping the entire void. The entire void was completely empty, except for a deep purple pool that was 1 acre in size at the bottom. The deep purple pool was sparkling, emitting a stable and heavy aura. Under the surrounding earthy yellow light, it looked extremely mysterious. Divine Thunderwater? Luo Fan's eyes lit up. This pool was obviously formed by the divine thunder of Earth, and the water in it was obviously the divine thunder of Earth that was condensed and refined. They looked gentle, but they had unimaginable power. So this pool of lightning is suppressing the void. I see. Luo Fan observed for a while, and a happy smile appeared on his face. The Wuji Void Palace technique was a magic art used to make a temporary cave abode. The void that was made was different from a real cave abode, as it was not stable. Something, or even the refiner himself, was needed to suppress it in order for the void to exist stably. When Luo Fan was making this Wuji Void Palace, he used the priceless earth essence to refine it, and by chance, he summoned the divine thunder of earth to form a pool of lightning, which replaced his own body to suppress the void. This way, the Wuji Void Palace's grade had increased by at least one level, and it was only one step away from becoming a Dharma treasure. If this Wuji Void Palace became a Dharma treasure, then the internal cycle would be formed and energy would be generated on its own. Without external help, it could be used as a real cave abode. Chapter 27. The void created by the everlasting Void Palace could be said to have been created by Luo Fan. Therefore, in this void, Luo Fan was the most powerful being. He could even be compared to Pangu. In other words, in this void, Luo Fan was almost omnipotent. With a move of his mind, without using any magical power, the void automatically shifted and Luo Fan appeared at the edge of the thunder pool. He bent down and reached out to touch it. A cool and soft feeling came from his hand, as if he was touching real, clear water. However, this thunder water was, after all, condensed from divine thunder. After Luo Fan's palm entered, it slowly penetrated into the inside of his palm, giving him a feeling as if his palm was gradually merging with the thunder water, and also as if the thunder water was washing his palm from the inside out. So the control center was moved here. Luo Fan touched it and realized how important the pool of lightning was to the everlasting Void Palace. The limitless Void Palace was a temporary cave dwelling. Naturally, there would be a control hub. Previously, he couldn't find it no matter how he looked. Now that his hands came into contact with the lightning water, he realized that there was a mysterious existence hidden in the depths of the lightning water. Only now did he realize that the control center had been moved here and was being suppressed deep inside the pool of lightning. Waving his hand, a 1 meter long, half a meter wide, and 20 centimeters thick rectangle slowly floated up from the pool of lightning. In the blink of an eye, it landed in Luo Fan's hand. The surface of this rectangle was engraved with billions of mysterious talismans. They flowed like water and glowed with a faint yellow and purple light. As soon as his hand came into contact with the cuboid, a very mysterious feeling appeared. In an instant, he seemed to have become the limitless Void Palace. Everything within a radius of 100,000 kilometers was suddenly reflected in his mind and consciousness. Even the slightest detail could be seen, and not a single detail could be missed. Within this area, even the tiniest sand and pebbles couldn't escape his senses. The 9 layers of wind, lightning, and fire were even clearer. Luo Fan's original senses were already very broad. They could cover a radius of 20,000 miles. And with the help of the control center of the limitless Void Palace, his perception had actually increased by 5 times. It's only a supreme-grade celestial device, but can increase by 5 times. If the limitless Void Palace becomes a magic treasure, won't the increase be even greater? Luo Fan was inexplicably surprised. He suddenly felt that his head was filled with treasures, and the feeling of picking up a treasure made him unable to control his emotions. The Wuji Void Palace was just one of the innumerable spells created by Pangu's primordial spirit, but it was already so mysterious. Wouldn't the more profound spells be even more incredible? At this time, it was just when Hong Jun finished refining the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The Wuji Palace suddenly expanded 100 times. It changed from the size of a fist to the size of a small room. Then, the main door of the palace suddenly opened, producing an extremely powerful suction force. Under the effect of this suction force, Hong Jun was sucked into the main door without any resistance. He appeared next to Luo Fan in some mysterious way. After swallowing Hong Jun, the Wuji Palace shrank again. In the blink of an eye, it became the size of a fist. It floated in the void, rising and falling slightly, as if nothing had happened. Hongjun looked around, his eyes full of shock. I didn't expect Master to be so powerful. The creation of heaven and earth is a magical power that only the great god Pangu could have. The shock in Hongjun's heart made him become dull. For Hongjun, who had seen Pangu standing up to the sky, Pangu was the most powerful and noble existence he had ever seen. Although the void created by Luo Fan was indescribably different from the untainted land, Hongjun could not distinguish the essential difference between them with his knowledge. He just thought that the difference between the void and the untainted land was only the size. Pangu died because of the creation of heaven and earth, but his master easily created such a void. The difference between the two seemed not big. Although Luo Fan was Hongjun's master and was hundreds of times more powerful than Hongjun, he could not know what Hongjun was thinking at all. He only thought that Hongjun was shocked because it was the first time he saw such a wonderful void. He did not expect that he would be raised to the level of the great god Pangu by Hongjun in the blink of an eye. The mystery of the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light is beyond my expectation. It seems that your divine soul can now withstand the impact of replenishing energy. That's good. I'll take you to a place to absorb the replenishing energy. Luo Fan looked at Hongjun and nodded. Hongjun's understanding of Luo Fan had a fundamental change. At this moment, he became extremely respectful and reserved. He bowed and said, "As you wish, Master." Luo Fan was slightly surprised by Hongjun's attitude, but he did not think too much about it. He just nodded. With a thought, the Wuji Void Palace turned into a yellow and purple rainbow and rushed to a chaotic energy source 80,000 kilometers away. The source of the chaotic energy source 80,000 kilometers away was 10 kilometers underground. There were more than 10 tunnels around it that connected to the source, allowing the chaotic energy to spread in more than 10 directions and flow to an unknown distance. However, only a very small amount of chaotic energy could spread to the ground. Because of this, although the chaotic energy source contained a very large amount of chaotic energy, even more than the one Luo Fan stayed in last time, Luo Fan did not notice it even though he was so close to it. If he had not tried to increase the perception of the Wuji Void Palace and coincidentally discovered this chaotic energy source, he might have missed it. The flying ability of the Wuji Void Palace was almost 5 times faster than that of Luo Fan's cloud treading mist. After 10 breaths, they arrived at the location of the chaotic energy source. Luo Fan raised his hand and pressed down. The Wuji Void Palace sank down like an illusion. In the blink of an eye, it had sunk 10 kilometers underground. They came to the top of the chaotic energy source. This chaotic energy source was very large. It was estimated to be at least 100 kilometers in diameter. Because the density of the chaotic energy was too high, it had become as black as ink. It even looked like it was solid. Perhaps because of the existence of the chaotic energy source, there was a huge space 10 kilometers underground. The smallest tunnel had a diameter of 3 to 4 kilometers. The largest tunnel had a diameter of 30 to 40 kilometers. These tunnels were connected to this huge space. It was very spectacular. Good luck, good luck. There's actually a chaotic energy stone inside. Luo Fan controlled the Wuji Void Palace to touch the chaotic energy source. He was delighted. Through the Wuji Void Palace, he could already feel that the chaotic energy source had a chaotic energy stone. It was an irregular spherical chaotic energy stone with a diameter of 3 meters. The Primal Chaos Stone was a kind of stone that was condensed from Primal Chaos Chi. Due to the mysterious effects of Primal Chaos Chi, it had undergone some mysterious changes. It not only possessed the power that Primal Chaos Chi possessed, but also possessed characteristics that Primal Chaos Chi did not possess. Among them, the biggest characteristic was that it contained a weak spirituality. If it was used to refine weapons, even the most basic refining techniques would definitely be able to refine a magic treasure. This was already a very impressive characteristic. One had to know that the Wuji Void Palace was already so mysterious. However, it was only a top-grade magic treasure. Chapter 28. With the increased perception brought by the limitless Void Palace, Luo Fan instantly looked through the dozens of tunnels around the primal essence chi source. After a careful analysis, his mind moved and he waved his hand. Hong Jun had already arrived in a tunnel of more than 13 miles. The amount of chaotic energy here is moderate, and the impact is not strong or weak. It is suitable for your cultivation. You can practice here, but don't slack off, Luo Fan said casually. His voice was majestic and spread out. Hong Jun felt like he was in another world in the Infinite Void Palace. He couldn't feel the Infinite Void Palace moving at all, and he couldn't feel that the Infinite Void Palace had traveled tens of thousands of miles in just a few dozen breaths. However, he was not surprised that he suddenly came to a completely strange place. In his heart, it was normal for Luo Fan, who was at the level of Pangu, to do anything. He bowed and said, "Yes." Luo Fan moved his mind, and the long robe that was formed by the innate energy that covered Hong Jun instantly collapsed. This made Hong Jun's body become naked again, and at the same time, the restriction that prevented him from absorbing the innate energy also disappeared. The tunnel that Hong Jun was in was connected to the chaotic energy source. The surging chaotic energy was like a gray waterfall, constantly pouring into it. Hong Jun's figure appeared here, like a small reef that suddenly appeared at the source of the waterfall. It only caused a small whirlpool to appear in the chaotic energy. Although he was not restricted for a long time, the feeling of emptiness in Hong Jun's body had already made his desire for energy reach an unprecedented extreme. At this moment, the restriction that prevented him from absorbing energy disappeared. Hong Jun was like a fish in water, and an incomparably comfortable feeling appeared in his mind. He recited the mantra of the indomitable spirit and erect earth in his heart, and the mysterious energy in his body followed the route of the mantra and circled around his body in an incomparably mysterious path. His body seemed to have turned into a huge black hole after doing so. It crazily swallowed the endless chaotic energy around him. From the looks of it, it was as if the whirlpool had instantly increased in size by hundreds or thousands of times, almost blocking the entire tunnel entrance. Only thin strands of chaotic energy were able to escape the whirlpool's absorption and pour into the tunnel. The quality of the chaotic energy was many times higher than that of the innate energy. The conversion rate between the chaotic energy and the energy in Hong Jun's body was much higher than that of the sentient energy. Although there was still some disparity, boundless chaotic energy poured into Hong Jun's body. It was crushed by the mysterious transparent energy and then fused into Hong Jun's body. It was like a river entering the sea. An incomparably satisfying pleasure surged into Hong Jun's heart. Every time, a trace of mysterious power would enter his mud pill palace through some mysterious mechanism and attack his soul. In fact, this strange force was even more powerful than when he was absorbing the innate Yuan Qi. However, the moment the strange force approached Hong Jun's godly soul, the fist-sized talisman cocoon above Hong Jun's godly soul would spin and absorb the strange force, so that his godly soul would not be affected at all. As time passed, the mysterious energy in Hong Jun's body continued to grow. The emptiness that filled his body was gradually replaced by fullness. Luo Fan observed Hong Jun's cultivation and knew that the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light had taken effect. Under the protection of the inextinguishable spiritual light, his godly soul was no longer unable to withstand the attack. He finally relaxed. I originally thought that it would take a long time to refine the Wuji Void Palace into a magic treasure. I didn't expect my luck to be so good. I actually have the opportunity to upgrade it so quickly. Luo Fan observed the chaotic energy source through the perception enhancement of the Wuji Void Palace. Primal chaos stones could be used to refine magic treasures even with the crudest refinement techniques. This everlasting void palace was so profound that the magic treasures refined with the help of primal chaos stones would naturally be even more powerful. Anyway, Luo Fan didn't have any other magic treasure that he needed. He thought of putting the chaotic energy stone into the Wuji Void Palace and let it become a magic treasure. After making up his mind, Luo Fan raised his hand and pressed down lightly. The fist-sized Wuji Void Palace slowly sank. This primal chaos origin energy source was formed from endless primal chaos origin energy. It was many times stronger than the earth itself. The Wuji Void Palace could pass through the ground as if it was nothing. Naturally, it would be many times more difficult to pass through the chaotic energy source and enter its center. As the everlasting Void Palace slowly seeped in, the entire chaotic Yuan Qi source began to fluctuate slightly. Wave after wave of ripples began to spread from the spot where the everlasting Void Palace had entered. It only dissipated after spreading for more than 10 miles. The earthly immortal Tao fruit was a kind of achievement, a kind of fruit. Luo Fan didn't have the earthly immortal Tao fruit for too long. He didn't even fully understand the power of the earthly immortal Tao fruit. However, it was undeniable that the current Luo Fan was already extremely powerful. Although the chaotic energy source kept producing a strong repulsive force to repel the Wuji Void Palace, under Luo Fan's will, it didn't stop the Wuji Void Palace from entering. After a few dozen breaths, the Wuji Void Palace had broken through tens of thousands of chaotic energy layers and arrived at the center of the chaotic energy source. Yang. Here, there was an irregular spherical stone that was 30 feet in diameter floating in the air. There was no chaos origin energy within 100 feet of it. Within this chaos origin energy source, there was an extremely strange chaos origin energy vacuum. This was the primordial chaos stone. It was condensed from endless chaotic energy. It had its own consciousness and had countless mysteries. There were 365 orifices on it. They swallowed and spat out the void, as if there were endless spirits going in and out of it. Wonderful! Luo Fan observed through the Wuji Void Palace and couldn't help but cheer. Although he knew that the primal chaos stone was formed by the condensation of primal chaos energy, he didn't expect it to be so mysterious just from its appearance. He was even more delighted with his good luck. In his joy, he raised his hand and threw the palace hub in his hand up. When it was 3 feet above his head, it had become as small as a speck of dust. As soon as he raised his head and furrowed his brows, the dust-like palace hub rushed down and entered the space between his eyebrows. Through some mysterious mechanism, it entered the world of his sea of consciousness. After the dust-like palace hub entered the world of his consciousness, it instantly expanded and turned into a huge stone tablet. It landed on the side of the Buzhou mountain that was formed by his divine soul. As the core of the palace entered his sea of consciousness, the everlasting Void Palace seemed to have become another body of his. He could even feel any ripples that brushed past the everlasting Void Palace through this wonderful connection. It was a very wonderful feeling. This was because Luo Fan didn't spend any energy. He didn't even use any techniques to completely refine the Wuji Void Palace. After refining the Wuji Void Palace, Luo Fan didn't continue to stay here. He moved his mind, and his body appeared outside the Wuji Void Palace. He floated beside the primordial chaos stone. Chapter 29. As soon as Luo Fan came to the side of the primordial chaos stone, he felt his body suddenly become heavy. A strong pressure acted on his body out of nowhere, pressing down on his body from all directions, making it difficult for him to even move his fingers. Fortunately, Luo Fan had already attained the earthly, immortal fruit of the way, and the strength of his born Taoism aptitude was undeniable. Although the pressure from all directions was strong, it only made the earthly, immortal fruit of the way in his dantian expand and contract a little faster, but it couldn't really hurt him. He raised his hand and waved it gently, and the surrounding void seemed to solidify. Floating there was like being cast in steel. Although he wasn't hurt, it was very uncomfortable. The pressure of the primordial chaos chi exists in this form. How wonderful! Luo Fan sighed in his heart. The moment he felt the pressure, He knew that it was caused by the surrounding primordial chaos chi, which was hundreds of miles thick, condensing and contracting. As for why it was in the middle of the primordial chaos chi, how Yang could form such a spherical vacuum with a diameter of 100 feet was not something he could understand. After a pause, he didn't hesitate anymore. His mind moved slightly, and the mantra of Wuji Void Palace flashed in his mind. The earthly immortal fruit of the way in his dantian once again separated a sesame-sized Dharma power, which flowed along his meridians and quickly circulated in a mysterious path. After 81 cycles, the sesame-sized Dharma power turned into a golden light that was 1,000 times its size, with billions of three-dimensional talismans flashing in it. After the golden light appeared, Luo Fan let out a soft shout. He raised his hand and pointed at the Wuji Void Palace, and the golden light rushed out of his index finger, rushing towards the Wuji Void Palace, which was floating 3 feet above the primordial chaos stone. Because of the invisible pressure around it, the golden light didn't expand as much as the last time. It only changed from the size of a finger to the size of a fist. It just happened to match the size of the Wuji Void Palace. As the light entered his body, the limitless Void Palace suddenly erupted with an incomparably intense golden light. Following that, the entire palace suddenly collapsed, turning into a ball of purplish-yellow light mixed with a golden cloud. It sank again, instantly wrapping around the primal chaos stone that had a diameter of 365 apertures. It slowly contracted and squirmed. Hundreds of millions of three-dimensional talismans were shuttling back and forth in the golden cloud like frightened fish in a pond. They seemed to be in a panic, but no two of them would collide with each other. The moment the purplish-yellow light enveloped the primal chaos stone, a delicate balance was broken. The dense, pitch-black primal chaos energy in the surroundings suddenly shrank and pressed down like a landslide. Just by looking at the pressure here, one could guess that the force that came crashing down must be extremely terrifying. Perhaps even a diamond would be crushed into powder. Although Luo Fan's body was strong and his earthly immortal Tao fruit was mysterious, he did not have absolute confidence that he could withstand the impact without being injured. With a thought, the earthly immortal Tao fruit in his dantian suddenly dispersed and turned into a stream of mana. With a rush, it rushed out of his body through the countless apertures in his body. After rushing out of his body, the mana grew with the wind and turned into 129,600 Buzhou mountain-shaped, grayish-brown, three-dimensional talismans. They surrounded his body and overlapped to form a tight cover. The earthly immortal Tao fruit was very mysterious. Previously, when Luo Fan was refining the Wuji Void Palace, he had dug out a sesame-sized amount of mana. Just now, he had dug out another sesame-sized amount of mana and fused it with the primal chaos stone. Logically speaking, the number of talismans that formed the earthly immortal Tao fruit should be smaller. However, the reality was not so. After the mana left his body, the earthly immortal Tao fruit rotated slightly and the three-dimensional talismans that were lost were instantly replenished. Yet he still managed to maintain the number of 129,600. It was extremely mysterious and miraculous. These three-dimensional talismans were in the shape of Buzhou Mountain and contained a vast and unyielding aura. At this moment, they expanded and overlapped as if they had formed 129,600 small Buzhou Mountain around Luo Fan. The vast and unyielding aura rolled out and passed through the barrier of the primal chaos chi to Hong Jun, who was cultivating in the tunnel with a diameter of more than 13 miles. It made Hong Jun suddenly have infinite confidence, and the speed at which he absorbed the primal chaos chi increased several times. At the moment when the mana covered his body, the primal chaos chi also submerged Luo Fan's body. There was no deafening sound as expected, and there was no violent change of light and shadow. The whole process was strangely calm. The countless grayish-brown, three-dimensional talismans around Luo Fan did not shake at all and withstood the impact of a huge amount of primal chaos chi. The impact, which was enough to shatter a diamond, seemed to be nothing to the three-dimensional talismans. As for the golden cloud that was mixed with purplish-yellow light, its performance was even more mysterious. When the chaotic energy rushed towards the golden cloud, it was like a drop of water falling into the ocean. It was completely absorbed without any obstruction, and not even the slightest ripple was caused. As the primal chaos chi was devoured, the speed at which the countless three-dimensional talismans in the golden cloud swam increased several times, and the whole golden cloud shrank and squirmed more violently. During the whole process, the surface of the entire source of primal chaos chi did not change at all. It did not even shake. Hongjuan's cultivation in the outside world was naturally not affected. Seeing that the impact was easily blocked, Luo Fan relaxed. Under the envelopment of the three-dimensional talismans, he felt extremely relaxed. The strong pressure that originally existed also disappeared without a trace. After the golden cloud swallowed the first wave of primal chaos chi, it did not stop. Like a whale sucking in water, it kept swallowing the endless primal chaos chi that had turned black. Countless indescribable and extremely mysterious changes occurred in the golden cloud. The billions of talismans swam so fast that they almost created afterimages. Luo Fan recited the mantra of the infinite void palace technique in his mind and carefully observed the hub of the infinite void palace in his sea of consciousness. As time passed, the hub began to shrink, and the billions of talismans on its surface also changed. After an unknown period of time, the hub shrunk into a small dot like a speck of dust, and then suddenly exploded, producing an endless impact that swept across the entire world of Luo Fan's sea of consciousness. With a thought, Luo Fan's soul, which had already turned into Buzhou Mountain, trembled slightly. The impact that swept across the entire world of consciousness instantly subsided, unable to affect his sea of consciousness in the slightest. Looking at the hub of the infinite void palace, it had already turned into a pink and jade-like boy. It floated in the air, and a chaotic aura was emitted from its body. After the boy formed, he landed on the ground and bowed towards Buzhou Mountain 3 times. Tao Transformation Universe Void Body, Heaven and Earth Limitless Sea True Mystery, Limitless Boy Greets Master. His words were monotonous like a machine. An indescribable joy emerged in Luo Fan's heart. With a thought, he already knew the nature of this boy. This limitless boy was transformed from the control hub of the infinite void palace after it became a magic treasure. Although on the surface, it looked like a cute boy, but in reality, it was similar to a computer. Although it had intelligence, feelings, and could act on its own, it had no consciousness. It only knew how to listen to orders and had no thoughts of rebelling against its master. Limitless Boy, I confer you as the controller of the Limitless Void Palace. From now on, I will control the Limitless Void Palace. Luo Fan's mind moved, and a majestic voice reverberated throughout the sea of consciousness. As you command, the Limitless Boy said in a monotonous voice. These words weren't an act by Luo Fan, but a necessary process. Although the Limitless Boy was formed from the hub of the Infinite Void Palace after it became a magic treasure, it was the treasure spirit of the Infinite Void Palace, and the Infinite Void Palace was equivalent to its body. However, after all, it was an existence without consciousness. Without Luo Fan's words, the Limitless Boy definitely wouldn't have changed the structure of the Infinite Void Palace, and definitely wouldn't have optimized the layout of the Infinite Void Palace. If that was the case, the power of the Infinite Void Palace could at most be used at 40%. Chapter 30. With a thought in Luo Fan's mind, Wuji Boy turned and shrunk his body expressionlessly, rushing to a mysterious place in the sea of consciousness. In the blink of an eye, he left the sea of consciousness and came to the outside of his body. He left the protection of Luo Fan's magic power and directly appeared in the chaotic energy. At this moment, there was no more chaotic energy vacuum around them. The extremely thick chaotic energy filled every inch of the surrounding space, creating a pressure that was enough to crush steel. The power that crushed diamonds was just the impact of the chaotic energy vacuum disappearing. The normal chaotic energy pressure was not that terrifying. However, this pressure did not affect the Limitless Boy at all. The Limitless Boy was like a fish in a river, extremely relaxed. At the location of the Limitless Void Palace, there was no longer a golden cloud. In its place was a fist-sized palace that didn't look special at all. It was extremely simple and crude, and could even be said to be dilapidated. Its appearance was even more inconspicuous than before. Although it didn't look special on the outside, it seemed to be the center of the chaotic energy, suppressing it. That was the Limitless Void Palace that had already become a magic treasure. After Wuji Boy left Luo Fan's sea of consciousness, he shrunk his body and turned into a golden light. With another dash, he broke through the barrier of the chaotic chi and rushed into the Wuji Palace. As the Limitless Boy entered, the Limitless Palace suddenly exploded and turned into a cloud that emitted purple, gold, and yellow light. This cloud surged and crazily swallowed all the energy in the surroundings. That was the endless primal chaos yuan chi. The strength of the suction force had already reached a terrifying level. When the chaos essence stone had been swallowed, the chaos essence chi vacuum had disappeared. The intense change hadn't caused any changes on the surface of the chaos essence energy source. However, the moment the suction force had appeared, the entire chaos essence energy source had suddenly started spinning frantically. From the original solid black sphere, it turned into a huge black vortex shape. Among them, wave after wave of ripples spread from the center. The yang swept across the entire surface of the primal chaos origin energy source. Luo Fan looked at this scene, and his heart skipped a beat. He already knew that the Limitless Child was changing the structure and layout of the Limitless Void Palace in order to push the might of the Limitless Void Palace to the highest realm. Professional matters should be left to the professionals. He didn't care what the Limitless Boy was going to do. His figure flashed, and he took a step forward. He crossed 100 miles and came to the surface of the chaotic energy source. Under the cover of the three-dimensional talisman in the shape of Buzhou Mountain, which was also his magical power, the thick and dark chaotic energy in the surroundings couldn't pose any obstacle to him. When he took a step, it was as if he was walking on flat ground. His speed was much faster than when he used the Limitless Void Palace to travel through the primordial energy source. When he came to the surface, he looked at Hong Jun and found that Hong Jun had already entered a meditative state. He could no longer sense anything that was happening in the outside world. He nodded to himself and sat cross-legged on the surface of the chaotic vitality source. The wave after wave of ripples stirred up the entire primordial energy source. The rotation of the primordial energy source was like a huge vortex. But that wasn't a problem for Luo Fan. He sat cross-legged as if he was sitting on a stone. The rapid rotation below, the endless ripples, and the violent vibrations seemed to be happening in another space and couldn't affect him at all. With a thought, the magical power barrier that enveloped him instantly collapsed and shrank. In the blink of an eye, it turned back into a strand of grayish-brown magical power that was as thin as a hair. With a fierce rush, it spread out and rushed into his body through countless acupuncture points. With a turn, it arrived at his lower abdomen dantian and condensed into a strange fruit, shrinking and shrinking erratically. The lower abdomen dantian was a huge pouch. It was very spacious, and 1296 meridians were connected to this huge pouch from all directions. The earthly immortal fruit of the way seemed very small in this pouch, but it was like the master of the entire dantian. It was very mysterious. Luo Fan's mind almost silently recited the incantation of the nameless cultivation method, and the earth immortal Dao fruit condensed in his dantian. After the earthly immortal fruit of the way shrank and shrank 81 times, it suddenly dispersed and turned into a magical power that rushed into one of the 1296 meridians. It revolved around the mysterious circulation route of the nameless cultivation method. An extremely powerful suction force emerged from his body and frantically tore at all the primordial energy around him. A bigger and bigger vortex was created. He was sitting cross-legged on the primordial energy source. The primordial energy source below him was constantly emitting thick primordial energy. The moment Luo Fan operated his cultivation method, more than half of the chaotic energy emitted by this 100 miles wide chaotic energy source couldn't escape. Instead, it was pulled by the terrifying, tearing force that was emitted from his body, constantly pouring into his body. The primordial energy that poured into his body was instantly torn apart and then devoured by the magical power. The endless primordial energy that poured into his body was torn apart and devoured by him. The whole process was extremely smooth. There was almost no reluctance or pause. When Luo Fan had just attained the earthly, immortal fruit of the way, he met Hong Jun, who came to take him as his master. After that, he created techniques for Hong Jun and refined the infinite void palace. However, he hadn't properly absorbed the primordial energy to replenish his magical power. He also hadn't calmed down to carefully experience the power of attaining the earthly, immortal fruit of the way. This was the first time he had recklessly absorbed the primordial energy after attaining the earthly, immortal fruit of the way. This feeling was several times more wonderful than absorbing innate yuan qi, and it was also several times easier. The endless primordial energy was torn apart and poured into the magical power unit, which was the three-dimensional seal in the shape of Buzhou Mountain. It was like a river flowing into the sea. There was no change at all. There seemed to be an infinite space within the three-dimensional talisman, which could contain an infinite amount of energy. The tearing force became stronger and stronger, and the primordial energy absorbed increased. After a while, the amount of primordial energy absorbed by Luo Fan caught up with Hong Jun, who had been cultivating for a long time. After a while, it was several times more than Hong Jun. Time was meaningless in the primordial world. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. In the past 100 years, Luo Fan had been absorbing continuously. After the infinite void palace, which had become a Dharma treasure, had been absorbing crazily, some had been left for Hong Jun to absorb. The chaotic primordial energy source, which was originally 50 kilometers in diameter, was now less than 100 feet in diameter. Moreover, there were already traces of purple, golden, and yellow light in the 100 feet of chaotic primordial energy source. Obviously, it was so thin that it could not cover the light of the infinite void palace. Luo Fan, who had not moved for 100 years, slowly opened his eyes. There was no light flashing in his eyes. It was as if two extremely deep universes were filled with the void, making him look extremely wise. This phenomenon only lasted for a moment before it disappeared without trace. It's on the cover of the second category, and the effect seems to be pretty good. I've gained more than 300 collections in half a day. Compared to those antis, this is nothing. But for me, who only has 1,000 collections in a month, it's already very amazing. Yep, thank you all for your collections, and I sincerely hope that you all can vote for me every day. Chapter 31. In 100 years, more than half of the chaotic primordial chi source was swallowed by the infinite void palace. The remaining 90%, or more than 40%, was absorbed by Luo Fan, and the rest was used by Hong Jun. After absorbing more than 40% of the chaotic primordial chi source, Luo Fan felt that the Dharma power in his body, which was the size of a strand of hair, seemed to be more substantial and stronger. It was no longer as empty as it was 100 years ago. But that was all. Time in the untainted world was worthless. Perhaps only the time calculated according to the Yuan Hui, 129,600 years in Yuan Hui, could be considered a relatively long period of time. 100 years was nothing at all. The nameless cultivation method that Luo Fan comprehended was created based on his understanding of Buzhou Mountain. Its initial stage was to incarnate the divine soul into Buzhou Mountain. The level of this cultivation method had reached an unimaginable level. Every step of this cultivation method required an unlimited amount of energy to push forward. The entire chaotic primordial chi source was equivalent to a small snack for him. However, this little snack also had endless benefits for Luo Fan. Although his Dharma power was just a little more abundant, his strength had increased by at least 3 times. After attaining the Earth Immortal Tao Fruit, there were 3 realms. The itinerant Immortal Realm, when the Tao Fruit was first formed, the perfected Immortal Realm, when the Tao Fruit was perfected, and the Golden Immortal Realm, when the Tao Fruit was turned into nothingness. The gap between these 3 realms was almost unimaginable. To cross a realm, it would take thousands of yuan hui to accumulate an endless energy to push forward. According to strength, the gap between a beginner itinerant immortal and a senior itinerant immortal could be as big as 100 times. Suddenly, Luo Fan's mind moved. He felt that the chaotic primordial chi source, which was only 100 feet in diameter, was shaking more and more violently. There was a kind of instability, a feeling that it was about to collapse. He knew that this was the final stage. It was the first change after the infinite void palace became a magic treasure. The first layout adjustment was about to end. He lifted his leg and took a step. Without any smoke or fire, he arrived at the entrance of the tunnel where Hongjun was dozens of miles away. At this moment, there were no longer any abnormalities around Hongjun's body. The huge whirlpool had already disappeared, but he was sitting cross-legged in that position, his whole body naked. The mysterious energy in his body filled his meridians, flowing like flowing water. Taking a closer look, Luo Fan's eyes flashed. He instantly saw through Hongjun's Naiwan Palace and saw his consciousness. At this moment, Hongjun's sea of consciousness was still the same as before. It was as wide as a football field, and his soul was in the middle of it. Yang sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. His soul was shrouded in black mist, drifting up and merging with the inextinguishable spirit light above his head, which was wrapped by countless transparent talismans like a silk cocoon. Streams of strange power filled up his entire spiritual sea. These strange powers were invisible and intangible, coming from countless mysterious places out of nowhere, constantly rushing towards his divine soul. However, the innate, inextinguishable spirit light on his divine soul was extremely powerful. It was as if an invisible force field was emitted from his body and enveloped his entire divine soul. As long as the foreign force came within 3 feet of his divine soul, it would be completely devoured by the spirit light. However, as long as the strange power was within 3 feet of his body, the spirit light would not care at all. The strange power was endless. It constantly rushed towards his divine soul and entered the 3 feet of his body. It was continuously swallowed by the spirit light. The whole process was as if the spirit light was using his body as a medium to crazily absorb the surrounding strange power. Luo Fan observed for a while and nodded to himself. He already knew that these strange powers were formed because the power in his body could not be transformed into mana. Therefore, they would have an infinite impact on his divine soul. They were produced along with the power in Hongjun's body. As long as the power did not stop, they would never stop. However, they could not be used by anything. Even if the inextinguishable spirit light absorbed the strange power would disappear the moment it entered the spirit light. The inextinguishable spirit light is really mysterious. No wonder it can evolve into a primordial spiritual treasure. Luo Fan could not help but exclaim in admiration. There was even a trace of envy in his heart. After carefully observing for a while, he found that Hongjun's body was in a surprisingly good condition. At this moment, he was comprehending the subtle mysteries of the art of supporting heaven and earth. He was satisfied and did not disturb him. He turned to look at the chaotic energy source dozens of miles away. This was a spherical space with a diameter of 100 miles underground. It was connected to dozens of large and small tunnels that led in all directions. In other words, there was no light source here. It was completely dark. Luo Fan was not affected because he had already attained the earthly immortal realm and became an individual immortal. His strength was amazing. and the darkness could not obstruct him. Hong Jun did not attain the earthly immortal realm, so he was much weaker. Although he could still see some of it, it was only a blur. In such a huge, spherical dark void, there was a black sphere that was 30 feet in size. It was emitting traces of purple, gold, and yellow light. Young. This black sphere expanded and contracted, trembled, rotated, and vibrated, showing the violent reaction inside. As time passed, the crack in the black sphere became bigger and bigger, and the light coming from it became brighter and brighter. Gradually, these traces of light expanded into countless light beams. These light beams were like lasers that penetrated the barrier of the black sphere and spread in all directions. Although the light was not very strong, it was very conspicuous in this darkness. In the blink of an eye, the entire huge space was enveloped in a layer of light. The light became stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, it had already connected. The place where the gray sphere used to be was replaced by a golden cloud mixed with purple and yellow. The remaining source of chaotic energy had been completely devoured. The remaining golden cloud kept tumbling and condensing. After devouring more than half of the chaotic energy source, its appearance did not change at all. It looked exactly the same as before. Compared to when it had become a magic treasure, the only difference was that it lacked the countless three-dimensional talismans. Luo Fan calmly looked at the golden cloud, his mind unperturbed. He had already refined the infinite void palace. Although he could not sense the changes in the golden cloud, he could still feel that the adjustment process was very smooth. Naturally, he did not need to worry. Suddenly, a circle of visible spatial ripples spread out in all directions from the location of the golden cloud. The golden cloud instantly contracted to form a fist-sized square palace that was so simple that it appeared to be in a dilapidated state. After the palace was formed, it suddenly expanded and turned into a huge palace that was hundreds of feet tall in the blink of an eye. In a flash, it appeared in front of Luo Fan as if it had teleported. When the palace was only the size of a fist, it appeared simple and unadorned. However, when it expanded to its current height of 300 meters, it gave off an extremely majestic and dignified aura. Looking up at it, one would feel as if they were extremely tiny. The huge palace's front door suddenly opened. A golden boy appeared at the door. He was very cute. It was the Limitless Boy. After the Limitless Boy appeared, he was expressionless and bowed mechanically. Master, the Infinite Void Palace has finished adjusting. Please inspect. Chapter 32. Luo Fan nodded calmly. He took a step and arrived at the stairs in front of the palace. With another step, he crossed the glaze-like barrier and entered the Wuji Palace. The Limitless Boy didn't have any self-consciousness. Everything was based on Luo Fan's will. He followed behind Luo Fan and stepped into the palace. As soon as Luo Fan stepped into the door, he felt a strange qi rushing towards him. This qi seemed to be innate, but not innate. It seemed to be chaotic, but not chaotic. It was in between the two. It had the qualities of both, but it was not the same. It was very strange. Master, although this palace has been adjusted, due to the lack of chaotic qi, it can't make a breakthrough in its nature. It can't generate chaotic qi by itself. It can only generate the transitional qi between chaotic qi and innate qi. The Limitless Boy's monotonous voice came from behind. Luo Fan nodded, but didn't say anything. In fact, he was already shocked by the scene inside the Limitless Void Palace. In front of him was a boundless void. Within this void, a piece of land that was about 1,000,000 kilometers in circumference floated in the void. Thousands of miles above this piece of land, there was a round golden ball of light emitting infinite light and heat. It was like the sun shining on this piece of land. On this piece of land, there were mountains and rivers, grasslands and forests, hills and mountains, swamps and lakes, continents and oceans. As long as there was a trace of impression in Luo Fan's memory, he could find it on this piece of land. Compared to his memory, it was more realistic and perfect. Moreover, these various terrains weren't piled up randomly. Instead, they were arranged in a very mysterious way. It looked very natural, as if the heaven and earth were born naturally. However, it also formed an obscure ray. It produced a faint mist and illuminated the entire piece of land like a fairyland. Luo Fan's current position was above the golden ball of light above this piece of land. Here, the infinite light and heat emitted by the golden ball didn't affect his body at all. It couldn't cause any discomfort to him. The door of the Wuji Palace was turned to the golden ball of light by the Limitless Boy. Excellent layout. Limitless Boy, you did a good job. Looking down at the ground, Luo Fan could not help but praise. Thank you for your compliment, Master. Limitless Boy answered expressionlessly. Luo Fan also knew that the Limitless Boy did not have a sense of self. He did not like to be praised, scolded, or hit. He did not get angry and did not care about him. In this limitless void palace, Luo Fan was omnipotent. With just a thought, the void moved on its own. His feet had already stepped onto a towering mountain on the ground. This towering mountain covered an area of over 1,000 miles, and the area at its peak was dozens of miles wide. On the peak of this mountain, there was a majestic palace. On both sides of the palace, there was a couplet. The god of creation, Yin and Yang, cut the twilight. On top of the palace, there was a huge plaque with the words, "At the peak." Not bad, not bad. Luo Fan thought about it. These two lines of the poem were quite mysterious, and when he looked at it, a sense of pride emerged in his heart. With a thought, everything within the palace appeared clearly in his mind. This palace was not very big, but it still occupied a radius of dozens of miles. The layout of the palace was very mysterious. There was a floor every 5 steps and a pavilion every 10 steps. There were winding corridors, and the eaves were carved high. Although the layout was so gorgeous, it looked very natural, as if it was born from heaven and earth. In the depths of this palace, there was a deep purple lightning pool that was about an acre in size. It reflected the golden light from the golden ball of light in the sky. It was very beautiful. In the middle of this lightning pool, there was a platform with a radius of 10 feet. The platform was in the middle. There was a circular jade pillar with a diameter of 10 feet and a height of 3 feet. On top of the jade pillar, there was a warm and crystal clear praying mat made of unknown materials. When Luo Fan saw this, he knew that this was a place for cultivation. With a thought, he teleported and arrived on this platform. This platform is where the energy of the entire limitless palace gathers. The concentration of the energy here is 10,000 times that of other places. It has already turned into chaotic energy, which is suitable for Master's cultivation. It is also the control hub of the palace. Master only needs to leave a trace of thought here, and you can borrow the power of the limitless palace. The Limitless Boy appeared behind Luo Fan and said. Luo Fan's heart moved. He had already obtained the answer from the Limitless Boy's memory. The Limitless Boy was the control hub of the limitless palace. It was a different kind of living being. It was the control center of the entire palace. Because he had already been refined by Luo Fan. After the limitless palace became a treasure, Luo Fan only needed to think to know all of the Limitless Boy's thoughts and memories. In the Limitless Boy's memory, he knew that this platform was the other body of the Limitless Boy. It could also be seen as the control hub of the entire limitless palace. If he had to compare it, then the Limitless Boy was equivalent to the server, and this platform was equivalent to the client computer. Therefore, Luo Fan could use this platform to obtain the power of the Limitless Boy. He didn't need to take the Limitless Boy into his body to borrow all the power of the palace. Without taking the Limitless Boy into his body, he could still obtain some power, but not much. After understanding this, he was a little curious. His body had already arrived on the praying mat at the top of the jade pillar, and he sat down cross-legged. A stream of warm and gentle chaotic energy emerged from the cushion beneath him, continuously flowing into his body. Although it wasn't much, it was better in that it would never stop flowing. At the same time, he felt that his perception was connected with the entire limitless palace. Everything in a limitless palace was like his body. He didn't even need to perceive to be able to completely understand everything inside. Following that, his perception rapidly increased in an almost limitless manner. The wider world outside the Wuji Palace was reflected in his mind and will. After 100 years of cultivation, although Luo Fan's strength had increased several times, his perception hadn't improved much. It still maintained a range of 20,000 miles. The improvement of his perception wasn't due to the amount of energy he absorbed. If he wanted to improve it, he had to rely on the advancement of his realm and the evolution of his divine soul. If he didn't try to comprehend the great Tao, even if his strength broke through to the itinerant immortal realm, there wouldn't be much improvement in the range of his perception. Before the limitless Void Palace became a magic treasure, it already had a strong amplification of perception. Now that it had become a magic treasure, and with the limitless boy's rearrangement and remodeling, it was able to display the strongest power. The amplification of perception was even greater. 100,000 miles, 150,000 miles, 200,000 miles. His perception kept increasing as if there was no limit. The bigger and bigger world was reflected in his mind. Although Luo Fan had achieved the earthly immortal's Tao fruit, and his spirit had incarnated into Buzhou Mountain to suppress the world in the sea of consciousness, supporting the world in the sea of consciousness, making it incomparably firm and tough. His mind had also become extremely strong because of this, but it was still limited. When the world within a radius of 300,000 miles was reflected in his mind, he found that when his perception range expanded further, the world he sensed had become blurry. I can't bear it anymore. Luo Fan thought for a while and understood what was going on. The reason why this happened was not because the limitless Void Palace could only amplify his perception to this extent. Instead, it was because his mind could only handle the information coming from the various things in the world within a 300,000-mile radius. If his perception range expanded any further, he would not be able to handle it, which was why his perception was so blurry. With a thought, he turned his attention to the area that had become blurry 300,000 miles away. In an instant, the area that he could clearly perceive within 300,000 miles instantly became blurry, and the area that was blurry became clear. His perception continued to extend, and the world reflected in his mind became wider and wider. It expanded to a radius of millions of miles before he could continue. Originally, his perception within a radius of 20,000 miles was enhanced by the limitless palace. In terms of distance, it was increased by 50 times. In terms of area, it was increased by 2,500 times. In terms of volume, it was increased by a terrifying 125,000 times. Of course, the height of the untainted land wasn't as high as millions of miles, so the real volume of the perception would be much smaller. The power of the treasure was so terrifying. Luo Fan couldn't help but be shocked and excited at the same time. Chapter 33. Luo Fan dispersed his perception, and the vast world in his mind gradually dissipated, turning into nothingness. Then, what appeared in his mind was the image of the entire Wuji Palace. After the Wuji Palace became a magic treasure, it had opened up a boundless spirit kiliocosm inside. Its area was so vast that even Luo Fan did not know where it ended. However, in this boundless spirit kiliocosm, most of the space was empty. Only in this spirit kiliocosm, there was such a piece of land with a radius of millions of miles. In this spirit kiliocosm, every inch of space was producing the strange pneuma that was between the primordial chi and the primordial chi. As soon as this strange pneuma was produced, it was moved by some special mechanism to that piece of land with a radius of millions of miles. Although the spirit kiliocosm was so vast that there was almost no boundary, the strange pneuma produced in every inch of space was extremely thin, so thin that it was almost negligible. Therefore, even though the strange pneuma produced in every inch of space in the spirit kiliocosm was moved to this piece of land, it did not make the pneuma in this piece of land very dense. The pneuma in this piece of land was only half as dense as the pneuma in the outside world. It has the ability to change the speed of time. Luo Fan sensed the entire spirit kiliocosm. Suddenly, he was shocked and then happy. When his mind entered the platform, The entire everlasting void palace was like his body. With just a thought, he knew the greatest secret of the everlasting void palace. This everlasting void palace actually had the ability to change the flow of time in this palace. Speed up to 365 times the outside world, and decelerate to 1/365 of the outside world. Unfortunately, both of them consume a lot of energy. If I speed up time by 365 times, the concentration of pneuma will be 1/365 of the outside world, and vice versa. After the pleasant surprise, Luo Fan could not help but feel that there was a fly in the ointment. He wanted to test this ability to change time. With a thought, a flower bud somewhere on the ground sped up 365 times. In the blink of an eye, the flower bud quickly bloomed into a gorgeous flower, and then the flower withered at an even faster speed. In the blink of an eye, the whole process of the flower blooming and withering had passed. With another thought, his mind came to a drop of fruit that was falling from a tree. With a thought, he slowed the fruit down to 1/365 of the time. The fruit instantly turned into a snail, wriggling bit by bit into the ground. Seeing this, Luo Fan was very satisfied. Obviously, whether it was time acceleration or time deceleration, it was very effective. Although the concentration of origin chi in the spirit space would change after changing the flow of time, it would be better if he didn't use it to absorb origin chi for cultivation. Instead, he would use it to cultivate techniques that required time to comprehend the Tao and to nourish his magic tools. Letting go of the power that could change the flow of time, he opened his mind and scanned the entire Wuji Palace with his mind. After admiring the various sceneries on the land, he opened his eyes. At this time, the limitless boy was standing on the platform like a statue. Luo Fan glanced at him, stood up, and said, "Limitless boy, if I don't stop you in the future, use all your strength to sense the heaven and earth that you can sense. If there is any abnormality, do not delay and immediately inform me. Understand?" "Yes." The limitless boy's voice was still the same. With that, his figure gradually disappeared. He gradually integrated into the spirit kiliocosm. The area of China on Earth was 9.6 million square kilometers. It was equivalent to more than 300,000 square kilometers, or 600,000 square kilometers. The perception range of the limitless void palace had a radius of 1,000,000 miles, which was equivalent to monitoring his surroundings at any time and any place. It was equivalent to the vast area of China. This was a great advantage, so Luo Fan naturally wouldn't let it go. With the help of the spirit kiliocosm, when Luo Fan used the spirit kiliocosm to sense the outside world, because his mind couldn't handle too much information at the same time, the scene he saw would become blurry. However, the limitless boy was the treasure spirit of the spirit kiliocosm. The ability to sense the outside world was his instinct. How much he could sense depended on how much information he could handle. Naturally, he could observe everything within a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers, no matter how big or small. With this arrangement, not only could his mind and willpower not bear the huge pressure, but he could also use the advantage of the spirit kiliocosm. Since the arrangement was done, Luo Fan teleported. In the blink of an eye, his body passed through the palace gate and arrived outside the spirit kiliocosm. He waved his hand, and the spirit kiliocosm shrunk into a square palace the size of a fist. It laid quietly on his right palm. At this moment, it was the time when Hong Jun broke free from the spirit kiliocosm. The moment Luo Fan appeared, Hong Jun opened his eyes. 2 rays of warm light flashed in his eyes. It lasted for less than a breath before it disappeared again. Hong Jun stood up, and his body made a crackling sound. Strands of transparent energy spread out from all the acupuncture points in his body, enveloping his body like a cloud. That was the mysterious energy inside his body. It had already filled his dantian and meridians, but it was unable to transform into mana. Therefore, as he moved, it broke through the shackles of his body and overflowed from his acupuncture points. When Hong Jun saw Luo Fan's outstanding figure standing in front of him, His eyes couldn't help but reveal a strong sense of childlike admiration. He bowed and said, "Greetings, master." Luo Fan smiled. He raised his left hand and turned it slightly. The earthly, immortal fruit of Wei in his body beat a little faster. A thick layer of rocks fell off. Then, this layer of rocks melted into a black liquid ball with a diameter of 300 meters under an invisible force. After that, countless black impurities in the black liquid ball were turned into thick smoke by the invisible force. They evaporated from the black liquid and flowed to an unknown place in the tunnel. As the impurities were eliminated, the color of the liquid became lighter and smaller. After a while, its volume had shrunk to a small ball of dark gray liquid the size of a bowl. Luo Fan raised his hands and pulled them gently. The invisible force underwent countless subtle changes. The dark gray liquid the size of a bowl instantly expanded and turned into a soft gray-black robe. He pressed down gently, and the robe covered Hong Jun, wrapping his body. As the robe wrapped him, the energy overflowing from all the acupuncture points in Hong Jun's body was completely absorbed, and there was no sign of energy overflowing. After doing all this, Luo Fan said to Hong Jun, "This is a magic tool embryo made of mixed essence iron. Your energy has been replenished, so you can't absorb any more energy in a short time. However, you could take the opportunity to nourish and refine it. Maybe you can upgrade it into a magic tool." Just now, although Luo Fan seemed to have casually chosen the surrounding rocks, there were treasures everywhere in the untainted land. The most original essence of these rocks was a very rare kind of iron ore. In addition, they had been soaked and tempered by the chaotic vitality for more than 1,000 years. They had long turned into chaotic essence iron and become a very precious material for refining weapons. What Luo Fan had done just now was to purify the chaotic essence iron and shape it. He did not put any dharma spells or talismans in it. Therefore, this robe had become a pure magic tool embryo. This kind of magic tool embryo was the product of the first step of refining weapons. As long as it was constantly nourished and refined, and some dharma spells and talismans were put in, it could become a magic tool with special power. The specific power would depend on the refining method. "Thank you for the reward, master." Hong Jun bowed and thanked him with great joy. As for the problem that some readers feel that the magic treasure is too powerful, there is no need to worry at all. After all, not the main character has magic treasures. Well, this book has disappeared from the newcomer ranking in the blink of an eye. It feels quite bad. Although the best result of this book is only the 13th place on the newcomer ranking, it pains me to think about it. I'm just one place away from the homepage. It is not difficult for readers to find this book as long as it is on the newcomer ranking. Therefore, in order to prevent this book from disappearing from your site, try your best to collect it. Well, by the way, there's another way to find this book this week, only this week. That is to click on the Xinxia channel and click on the Primordial World's deification in the section of the second category's recommended cover. Then you can see this book. Chapter 34. Luo Fan faintly smiled. He raised his hand and waved. The limitless palace in his palm rotated and shook. It turned into a purple-yellow ray of light and suddenly expanded. Then, it wrapped around the master and disciple. Then, the purplish-yellow light abruptly shot upwards. The thick layer above was like an illusory image. It didn't affect the purplish-yellow light at all. The light directly sank into it and rushed up. In the blink of an eye, the light had crossed the layer of layers that was 10 miles thick and rushed straight out of the ground. After rushing out of the ground, the light loosened and put Luo Fan and Hong Jun on the ground. Then, it suddenly turned and condensed again. It turned into a square palace and floated back to Luo Fan's palm. 100 years ago, because the chaotic vitality kept seeping out of the ground, no plants could grow in a large area of the surrounding land. Therefore, this place was more desolate than other places. Now, because the source of the chaotic vitality had disappeared, there was no longer the erosion of the chaotic vitality. The land that had been tempered by the chaotic vitality was more fertile than other leptons and more suitable for the growth of plants. Therefore, this place was full of vitality. All kinds of plants grew densely, and it was green as far as the eye could see. Luo Fan looked into the distance and estimated in his heart. He found that the distance between this place and Buzhou Mountain was about 7,800,000 miles. Compared to the untainted land, this was very close. With a thought, he made a decision in the blink of an eye. He said to Hongjun, my disciple, you have enough energy now, but your realm is far from enough. That's why you can't prove the fruit of Wei. If you want to prove the fruit of Wei, you need to travel the untainted land and carefully understand the world. This place is more than 7,800,000 miles away from Buzhou Mountain. It's neither too far nor too close. Walk there with your feet and understand the world along the way in order to improve your realm. Hongjun trusted Luo Fan's judgment very much. Since Luo Fan said that only by traveling in the untainted land could he improve his realm, he naturally had to travel, so he bowed and said, "Yes, I will follow your orders." Luo Fan nodded his head. Without hesitation, his body flashed, and he entered the limitless palace. After Luo Fan entered the Wuji Void Palace, it suddenly shook and turned into a purple-yellow light again. Then, it rushed into the space between Hongjun's eyebrows and rushed into his sea of consciousness through a mysterious position. Luo Fan was not in the mood to walk slowly in untainted land with Hongjun. Although he also wanted to see what the untainted land looked like and understand the mysteries of the untainted land. Compared to this, another matter was more attractive to him. That was the countless magic arts created by Pangu's original spirit in his memory. The everlasting void palace technique was just one of the less profound ones among these techniques. Yet, it was this simple technique that was able to create the everlasting void palace technique that was already so profound. What kind of level could the other techniques reach? This was what he desperately wanted to know. After entering the Wuji Void Palace, he did not hesitate at all. He landed in the middle of the Thunder Pool, on the Yang platform. Sitting cross-legged, he moved his mind, and the time in the entire Wuji Void Palace suddenly sped up by 365 times. That was to say, if he stayed here for a year, only one day would pass in the outside world. With the change of time, the concentration of primordial chi in the entire Wuji Void Palace instantly dropped to 1/365 of the original concentration. Even though the place where Luo Fan sat had gathered all the energy in this spirit space, the concentration was so thin that it could only sustain Luo Fan's consumption. It was impossible for him to improve his cultivation. Luo Fan did not care about this. He closed his eyes and gradually immersed himself in the endless memory. Hongjun stood alone on this boundless land. The Buzhou Mountain in the distance was indescribably tall. It rose from the ground like a pillar that supported the sky and pierced the sky. Although he knew that it was more than 7 million miles away from here, he still felt that it was so conspicuous. Even with Hongjun's not very strong eyesight, he could still see most of the details of Buzhou Mountain. Of course, one of the reasons was that he had lived on the top of Buzhou Mountain for more than a yuanhui. He was already familiar with Buzhou Mountain. Master asked me to walk to Buzhou Mountain with my feet to understand the world and improve my cultivation. Then I will seal my energy and walk with my body. Hongjun thought to himself. Although the art of supporting heaven and earth was a cultivation method to improve cultivation, there were many applicable magic arts and methods in it. Hongjun's heart to seek Tao was extremely firm. In order to seek Tao, he could abandon everything. Naturally, he would not hesitate at all. He recited the mantra of the art of supporting heaven and earth silently in his mind. The mysterious energy in his body was naturally triggered. With a sudden rush, half of the energy rushed out from the top of his head. After the energy rushed out, it rapidly condensed and compressed. In the blink of an eye, it formed a glaze-like three-dimensional human-shaped talisman that was 100 feet tall. The three-dimensional human-shaped talisman was extremely complicated. The energy lines that made up the talisman were extremely complicated, but it was also filled with a mysterious meaning. After the three-dimensional talisman was formed, It produced a strong suction force on Hong Jun's body. Hong Jun's body was sucked into the talisman. Then, the three-dimensional talisman shrank instantly. In the blink of an eye, it shrank from 100 feet tall to the same height as Hong Jun. Finally, it was completely submerged into his body. A misty, strong light burst out of his body, but it disappeared in a flash. As the three-dimensional talisman disappeared, the mysterious energy in Hong Jun's body stagnated. Then, like the receding of the sea, it instantly poured into his lower abdomen. It shrank and could no longer be mobilized. Without the support of energy, Hong Jun's body fell heavily to the ground like a stone. The technique passed down by Master is indeed unbelievably powerful. Such a small technique can already seal all my energy, and it doesn't affect my body at all. Hong Jun felt the state of his body, and there was a hint of amazement in his eyes. After sighing, Hong Jun resolutely walked in the direction of Buzhou Mountain step by step. Although he relied on Luo Fan to seal all the energy in his body, Hong Jun's body was born Taoism after all. It was the same form as Panga's body. Naturally, it was not comparable to the human body of the later generations. The strength of his body was quite shocking, and his walking speed was also faster than a galloping horse. This was Hong Jun's first time using the born Taoism body to travel, so he did not suppress the power of his body. One step was dozens of feet, then hundreds of feet. How could he not be fast when walking like this? Based on his speed, it was almost 1,000 miles per hour. Even so, if he wanted to reach Buzhou Mountain at this speed, even if he did not sleep or rest, he would need at least 7,800 days, which was equivalent to more than 2 years. However, it was obviously impossible to travel without sleep or rest. After all, he remembered Luo Fan's instructions, which was for him to travel, understand the world, and increase his cultivation level. However, he needed to stop and walk. Therefore, the time spent would at least increase by several times. Piha, one more chapter. I wonder if there is a way to summon the reward of recommendation tickets. Of course, if you collect it or reward me, I will be even more grateful. Chapter 35. It had been 10 years since Hong Jun sealed his energy and walked in the untainted land with only his physical strength. Luo Fan had spent a total of 3,650 years in the limitless Void Palace. For him, the 10 years that Hong Jun had spent seemed to be longer and more fulfilling than the past one Yuanwei. The sky was high and the earth was wide. With this, Hong Jun pushed off with both feet and jumped into the turbulent river without hesitation. The distance between the starting point and the finishing point was more than 7,800,000 kilometers. Naturally, this part of the journey could not be flat, nor could it be flat land, grasslands, and the like. In such a vast land, there would naturally be no lack of rivers. At this time, the river that Hong Jun was jumping into was more than 800 miles wide. As far as the eye could see, it was as vast as the ocean. The water was rapid and the waves were huge. If a stone with a diameter of 100 feet was thrown into it, it would be swept away before it sank. With Hong Jun's strength, if he did not seal the energy in his body, this river would not be a problem at all. He only needed to summon a magic cloud, and it would be enough to fly across the 800 miles. But that was only if there was no energy in his body. Although his speed was faster than a galloping horse, and his jumping ability was amazing, it was impossible for him to jump 800 miles. Moreover, Hong Jun was stubborn. Since Luo Fan had already said that he would walk over with his feet, he did not think of crossing the river with the help of tools, so he planned to swim over. In fact, this was the 13th river that he had crossed in the same way. Different from the rivers that he had crossed before, this river was unbelievably wide. In the past 10 years, Hong Jun's walking speed was more than 10 times slower than expected. He walked and stopped. Until now, the distance that he had walked was less than half of the total distance. He had only walked about 3 million miles. Such a slow speed was because he followed Luo Fan's instructions. As he walked, he comprehended the world. After persisting for 10 years, Hong Jun's harvest was quite huge. Although all the mysterious energy was sealed in his dantian, it only meant that he could not use it. The energy that should be released from his body would still be released through a mysterious method. Otherwise, wouldn't his body explode from the energy? During these 10 years, his body was constantly emitting energy, which was then absorbed by the magic tool embryo forged from chaotic pure iron. This was equivalent to refining this magic tool embryo at all times. After all, this embryo was something that Luo Fan had casually refined, so it was not too difficult to refine. In 10 years, it had already begun to take the shape of a magic tool. Although Hong Jun still didn't have the ability, the energy in his body was sealed and he couldn't control it. To inject spells into it, just a natural refinement of energy had already given it a powerful defense and transformation ability. Along the way, he encountered many dangers. For example, he rolled down a high mountain dozens of times, fell into a bottomless cliff several times, fell powerlessly into the water several times, and was swept away by the waves several times. Dozens of times, he was bombarded by falling boulders and so on. However, he didn't suffer the slightest injury. Part of this was due to the toughness of his physical body, but more of it was due to the protection of the artifact embryo. In terms of the realm, because he was constantly comprehending the world, his realm had also improved a little. The mysterious energy in his body was more solid than 10 years ago. Although it still couldn't transform into magic power with infinite power, it was already moving in that direction. If one had to compare, the current Hong Jun's strength had increased by at least 50% compared to 10 years ago. Hong Jun worked hard to swim in the fast-flowing river. Under his thoughts, the robe on his body had already turned into a tight-fitting water suit, so that his movement in the river would not be hindered by the clothes. He was like a gray dragon, quickly shuttling through the water that reflected the white light. His movements were smooth and mysterious, and every move he made was filled with a sense of boundless power. His whole body fought against the huge waves in the river, revealing an indomitable momentum. 300 miles. As Hong Jun moved forward, he silently counted the distance he had moved forward. Through the experience of walking in the untainted land for the past 10 years, Hong Jun respected his master even more and was even more grateful. The effect of the 10 years of travel was so obvious that almost every time he thought of his experience during this period of time, he felt excited and excited. Perhaps, in Luo Fan's view, it was very unqualified for him to only make such little progress after 10 years of comprehending the world. However, for Hong Jun, who had been cultivating diligently for more than a Yuan Wei, he had only managed to cultivate a deformed Taoist body in the end. In just 10 years, his strength had actually increased by 50%. This was simply like moving forward on clouds and mist. Master, I won't let you down. I will definitely rely on my own 2 feet to walk to Buzhou Mountain. Hong Jun roared in his heart amidst the huge waves rushing down from upstream. Hong Jun's aptitude was very amazing. Although no one had taught him how to swim, after several experiences, his swimming movements had already reached a high level and were incomparably exquisite. If he were on Earth in the future, he would definitely be able to win the Olympic Games easily. In the Wuji Palace, Luo Fan sat cross-legged on the platform in the center of the Thunderbolt pool. His eyes were closed, and the magic power in his body surged. All kinds of lights flashed on his body. Endless mental cultivation methods, incantations, and magical powers flashed in his mind and mind. His entire mind and mind were completely immersed in them, and all perception of the outside world was cut off by him. 10 years in the outside world was 3,650 years in the Wuji Palace. During this long period of time, Luo Fan devoted all his heart and mind to the incantations that Pangu's original spirit completed for him. And with his earthly immortal realm, the results of more than 3,000 years of hard work were quite amazing. Suddenly, the whole spirit space shook slightly. The limitless boy's voice sounded out of nowhere and went straight into Luo Fan's mind and mind, waking up Luo Fan from that state of meditation. Master, there is a spiritual sense 487,230 miles to the east. It is preliminarily determined that it is a congenital god. Master, Please make a decision. Luo Fan's mind seemed to condense again from nothingness. At first, he was still a little confused. After a long time, he was completely awake and understood the meaning of the limitless boy's words. For more than 3,000 years, Luo Fan devoted all his mind to those incantations. He completely handed over the perception of the primordial world and the safety of Hongjun to the limitless boy. And the limitless boy also seriously carried out Luo Fan's request. In the 3,000 years inside the Wuji Palace, he paid full attention to everything within 1,000,000 miles around Hongjun. He carefully recorded all kinds of details and looked for the content that Luo Fan wanted him to pay attention to. Obviously, today the limitless boy finally found what Luo Fan wanted him to remind him. Limitless boy, how long has it been in the primordial world? Luo Fan's eyes gradually focused, and he asked, 10 years and 8 days, 8 hours and a quarter. This method of calculating time came from Luo Fan's memory. Because it was in line with the changes in the weather of the primordial world, it was chosen by the limitless boy. I see. Luo Fan nodded lightly. With a move of his mind, the Wuji Palace seemed to become his body. At the same time, his mind reflected the scene of the outside world. The first thing that appeared was Hongjuan's Sea of Consciousness, then his body, and then the river that was 800 miles wide and hundreds of thousands of miles long outside him. The entire range of reflection continued to expand. Gradually, it expanded to the position that the limitless boy had mentioned before, which was 487,230 miles to the east. As he shifted his attention to that position, all the other scenes became blurred. Only that position became extremely clear. Chapter 36. After seeing the scene in that position clearly, Luo Fan couldn't help but become a little excited. With a thought, Wuji Palace had already turned into a purple-yellow light. With another dash, it went into a mysterious position in Hongjun's Sea of Consciousness and left Hongjun's Sea of Consciousness in the blink of an eye. After leaving the Sea of Consciousness, it didn't stop at all. It went straight into Hongjun's body. It was expanding and contracting, floating 3 feet above his head. Master! Hongjun was resisting the surging waves rushing down from the upstream. Suddenly, he found that his glabella was cold. Then, a purple-yellow light appeared on the top of his head. He instantly understood that his master, who had disappeared for 10 years, had reappeared. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. In the past 10 years, although Wuji Palace was in his Sea of Consciousness, he sealed his own energy and didn't have an internal view of the Sea of Consciousness. So, although he knew that Wuji Palace was in his Sea of Consciousness, he couldn't see Wuji Palace at all. It was naturally even more impossible to see his master, Luo Fan. With the help of the perception of the limitless palace, Luo Fan carefully observed Hongjun. He was very satisfied. In the past 10 years, Hongjun's growth was great. Strength was secondary. His appearance already looked quite imposing. He was no longer as dull as he was 10 years ago. He already had some vicissitudes of life. Looking at his streamlined figure, which contained endless explosive power, it showed that he didn't slack off in the use of his body in the past 10 years. With a thought, Luo Fan's figure came out of Wuji Palace. He stood in the air and said in front of Hongjun, Hongjun, my disciple, you need to be careful next. I will be away for a while, but I can't protect you at all times. The moment Luo Fan came out, Hongjun felt that there seemed to be an invisible force around his body, isolating his body from the surrounding river. This kind of isolation made it so that he didn't need to work hard and his body could naturally stay in the same place. I understand, Master. Don't worry, Hongjun said quickly. Luo Fan nodded. The purple-yellow light, transformed by the Wuji Palace, suddenly rolled up and wrapped around his body. Then it rushed to the east at an extremely fast speed, leaving a long shadow in the air. In the blink of an eye, it had disappeared from Hongjun's sight. Hongjun only felt that the moment his master left, the invisible force around him that isolated the torrent of the river disappeared at the same time. His body sank again, and the wave that rushed over from upstream almost made him lose his balance. Startled, He hurriedly gathered his thoughts and continued to paddle to stabilize his body. After a while, he finally regained his balance and was able to move forward. After becoming a magic treasure, the speed of this infinite void palace was more than 20 times faster than Luo Fan's flying speed. A distance of nearly 500,000 miles was not much of a hindrance to him. In just a few breaths of time, he was wrapped in a purplish-yellow light and arrived 487,230 kilometers to the east. He could also see with his own eyes where the abnormality of this location was. Here, within a radius of tens of thousands of miles, whether it was underground or in the sky, there was not a trace of chaotic chi. Only endless innate chi filled the air. A giant strange tree that was tens of thousands of feet tall and had branches that were hundreds of feet in diameter stood on this piece of flat land. This giant strange tree's branches and leaves covered an area of nearly 1,000 acres. It was incomparably wide. That strand of spiritual sense was within this giant, strange tree. The branches of a strange tree were jagged and twisted, with countless bumps and wrinkles. Every leaf was nearly a meter long and half a meter wide. They were oval in shape and stacked on top of each other, almost blocking all the sunlight. Countless roots were like countless strange and rugged giant pillars, hanging down from the branches that were hundreds of thousands of feet above the ground. Every root was as big as a person's arms, and it drilled straight into the ground. It seemed to be helping the trunk to support the tree's crown, and also seemed to be helping the roots to absorb nutrients from the ground. The entire giant strange tree was like a whole lush forest. However, within a radius of 10,000 miles, there was not even a blade of grass. With a thought, Luo Fan separated a leaf from the tree's crown and slowly floated into his hand. It was tough like dragon skin and almost invulnerable. It's a natural talisman. Seeing this leaf clearly, Luo Fan could not help but feel surprised, because he suddenly found that on the most ordinary leaf on the tree, the veins actually formed a mysterious natural talisman. This natural talisman was extremely complicated and mysterious, as if it contained some kind of great mystery. After analyzing this natural talisman, Luo Fan was even more amazed, because he found that the power of this natural talisman was not ordinary. It could absorb the free energy between heaven and earth. It could absorb the light emitted by the sun. It could absorb the innate chi of heaven and earth. And it could absorb the innate chi of heaven and earth and transform it into a kind of vitality energy to enrich the body. Absorb, transform. Not bad, not bad. This talisman has a great effect on improving my Tao formations. After understanding the function of this talisman, Luo Fan was even happier. This talisman was naturally born from heaven and earth, and naturally contained the natural Tao of heaven and earth. Understanding it would allow him to have a deeper understanding of the Tao of formations. Not to mention anything else, just by looking at it, he had already solved a few small problems that he had encountered in the past 3,000 years. I wonder if I can communicate with this spiritual sense. Luo Fan had been standing here for a long time, and even plucked the leaves from the tree, but the spiritual sense still had no reaction, which made him a little worried. With a thought, a mnemonic mantra emerged in his mind. As this mnemonic mantra flowed through his mind, he suddenly felt that he seemed to have some kind of connection with this giant strange tree in front of him, as if he could have a completely heart-to-heart communication with this strange tree without any obstacles. This mnemonic mantra came from Luo Fan's fantasies about the divine powers of the Buddhist League, and was also a magic, or a divine power, perfected by Pangu's primordial spirit. The mind connection. The feeling of using the mind connection was quite wonderful, especially when this strange tree in front of him completely didn't defend its mind, and completely opened its mind for Luo Fan to sense. The feeling was even more wonderful. I want, a childish thought, like that of a baby, came out of the strange tree and entered Luo Fan's mind. Luo Fan was surprised. With a thought, the memory of that strange tree instantly appeared in his mind. At the beginning of the world, a strange and subtle change suddenly happened to a chaotic source of power, which condensed into a tiny seed. At the same time, an extremely blurry and ignorant spiritual sense emerged. As time went by, this tiny seed took root, sprouted, and grew. That little bit of spiritual sense also continued to grow. It grew from extremely weak appearance to now, like a baby. Although it was muddle-headed and ignorant, it had already begun to take the shape of a congenital god. Wind, rain, drought, heaven and earth changed, the ground shook, and the sea turned into mulberry fields. Hundreds of thousands of years had passed, and the tiny seed had grown into a giant tree that supported the sky. As it absorbed under the change of heaven and earth, the chaotic source of power that had been permeating within a radius of tens of thousands of miles around it had all been absorbed or dispersed, transformed into congenital vital chi, and disappeared without a trace. Under such circumstances, it seemed that it could no longer improve by just absorbing energy unconsciously. In other words, at this time, the strange tree was at a critical juncture. If it passed and broke through, it could truly become a congenital god. It would have a complete spiritual sense, be able to understand heaven and earth, create a cultivation method, cultivate itself, and then transform into a congenital Taoist body. It would be easy for it to step into the path of seeking Tao. If it couldn't pass, it would gradually stop growing as the chaotic source of power dispersed and transformed. It might even gradually wither, and its spiritual sense would gradually dissipate. In the end, it would become an ordinary tree, a material for refining weapons that countless cultivators could obtain. Chapter 37. I want. A childish thought, like a baby's howling, was constantly transmitted into Luo Fan's mind, making Luo Fan deeply feel the extreme desire of its soul. That was the instinctive, extreme desire for the chaos chi, for the cultivation method. Luo Fan's mind separated from the strange tree's memory. He felt that there was a great possibility that this strand of soul would eventually dissipate, but he couldn't help but feel a little sorry for it. Fine, since I've seen your innate talisman and gained something, I can't bear to see your soul dissipate. So I'll teach you this cultivation method. Luo Fan transmitted a thought from his mind, entering the soul of that strand of soul through his mind connection ability. I want. That strand of soul seemed to be unable to understand Luo Fan's thoughts, and still sent out a desire. Luo Fan sighed inwardly. Looking at this strange tree, he seemed to understand the living condition of the Pai Xiao before he possessed it. However, this strand of soul was even more unlucky than the Pai Xiao. The Pai Xiao could still wander around in search of the chaos chi, but this strange tree could only stay where it was. When the chaos chi in the vicinity was exhausted, it could only wait for its soul to degenerate, for its soul to dissipate. With a thought, countless characters and images were sent out from his soul, which had already transformed into Buzhou Mountain. They intertwined and merged together in the world of his consciousness, forming a little bit of light. Following his thoughts and relying on his mind connection ability, it rushed straight into the strange tree's soul. These characters recorded a very ordinary cultivation method, which was created by Pangu's original spirit according to Luo Fan's memory. It was the most ordinary one, with ordinary power and slow cultivation speed. It was even to the point that Luo Fan didn't bother to give a name. However, even though this cultivation method was ordinary, it was enough for the strange tree to cultivate, enough for it to achieve a breakthrough. That strand of soul instantly received the little bit of light that Luo Fan transmitted into its soul. That little bit of light instantly exploded, turning into countless complicated characters and images, and in the blink of an eye, engulfed its entire soul. An indescribable joy instantly came out from its soul and transmitted into Luo Fan's heart, making Luo Fan feel a lot better. Originally, without the chaos chi, this strange tree could still absorb the nutrients underground, absorb the primordial chi between heaven and earth, and absorb the essence of the moon. However, the energy it absorbed would be converted into vitality energy by its roots and leaves, which would be used to replenish and strengthen the tree. As a result, its body would become bigger and bigger, and its branches and leaves would become tougher and tougher. But for its most basic soul, there would be no benefit at all. The innate gods were born at the beginning of the world, when yin and yang were first judged, when life was flourishing and all living things were born. Therefore, the primordial chi was stimulated to undergo some mysterious changes. Its essence was the highest and most precious. But it was also because of this that only chaotic yuan chi could strengthen one's spiritual sense and allow it to grow to a perfect state. Apart from the chaos chi, the endless primordial chi, the essence of the moon, and the nutrients of the earth, no matter how much they absorbed, could only strengthen and strengthen their bodies. The cultivation method that Luo Fan transmitted into the strange tree soul was still recorded in the extremely complicated and abstruse characters created by Pangu. Now, he was getting more and more used to this kind of characters. Of course, it was not because he had been using this kind of characters for a longer time. Instead, it was because, compared to any other characters he had ever seen, this kind of characters had a much greater advantage. Characters were a carrier of information. For the same word, the amount of information contained in it would be at least 100 times more than if it was recorded in this complicated and abstruse language than if it was recorded in another language. Therefore, even though he had an indescribable sense of pride and superiority towards Chinese characters, Luo Fan had to admit that the characters created by Pangu were far more powerful than Chinese characters. Enjoy. The soul was crazily absorbing the information contained in the characters and pictures that Luo Fan transmitted to it. The ordinary incantation was sorted out in the blink of an eye. After all, an innate god was an innate god. Although this soul was muddle-headed and looked no better than a baby, its ability to understand cultivation methods was almost instinctive. In this aspect, all innate gods were geniuses. With the appearance of the cultivation method, the soul seemed to be clearer than before. Luo Fan felt the change of the soul, and he felt a little happy. Although the untainted land is big, you are the second innate god I've seen. I hope we can meet again in the future. Luo Fan transmitted this thought to the soul of the soul through his mind connection stone. He did not expect any response. After transmitting the thought, he wanted to cut off the mind connection stone and leave. But he didn't expect that after he transmitted his thought over, that spiritual sense actually had a response. Here you go. With this thought, an indescribable pain was generated from the soul of the soul of the soul, so that Luo Fan, who was connecting with the soul through his mind connection stone, also felt the pain as if a part of his body was cut off. Luo Fan was slightly shocked. Then, he suddenly felt that there was an object falling quickly from above his head, smashing toward his head. Just a preliminary feeling. He knew that the object was oblate, with a diameter of about 30 feet and a weight of at least 5,000 kilograms. With a thought, the purple-yellow light that was still around his body, which was the Void Wuji Palace, suddenly rolled up and wrapped the object. With another thought, the object was placed in front of Luo Fan. This was a fruit. Luo Fan's first impression told him that this was an extremely mysterious fruit with infinite mysteries. This was what the feeling of the Void Wuji Palace told him. With a thought, Luo Fan already understood what was going on. With a thought, Luo Fan already understood what was going on. This is the fruit you bore. Are you going to give it to me? Luo Fan transmitted his thought to the muddled soul through his mind connection stone. Fruit. Here you go. Here you go. The childish thought came again. Although it was only a few words, the meaning could not be more clear. Luo Fan understood this, and he could not help but feel a little ashamed. He had only used an ordinary technique, and this strange tree had used up tens of thousands of years to bear the fruit. Looking at the pain it felt when picking the fruit, it was self-evident how important this fruit was to it. It seemed that he had taken a huge advantage, with all kinds of thoughts in his mind. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. From the Earth Immortal's Tao fruit, a dust-like magical power unit suddenly separated, rushed up, and rushed out of his body. It grew with the wind and turned into a three-dimensional talisman about 10 feet high. shaped like Buzhou Mountain, extremely complex and mysterious. After this three-dimensional talisman appeared, it suddenly rushed straight into the trunk of the strange tree in front of it and did not encounter the slightest hindrance. This fruit is very precious. I will not take advantage of you. If you have the opportunity to transform in the future, if you are willing, you can use this talisman to find me. I can take you as my disciple and teach you the cultivation technique. Luo Fan transmitted this thought into the soul through his mind connection stone. Because he was worried that the soul might forget this thought in its muddle-headed state, he also added a little restriction to this thought, so that it would condense into a ball at least for a period of time and would not dissipate. As long as his mind touched it, he could understand the information contained in the thought. He knew the promise he had left behind. Chapter 38. After taking Hong Jun as his disciple, Luo Fan's self-confidence had risen to the extent that he was almost conceited. Even Hong Jun, the teacher of the sage and the teacher of heaven and earth, I can take him as my disciple. Is there any existence in this untainted land that I can't take as my disciple? This was his inner thought. It was precisely because of this thought that he had left behind such a promise. Moreover, he was not blindly confident. Even if he couldn't teach the strange tree after taking it as his disciple, he could throw the strange tree to Hong Jun, the senior brother. Hong Jun, the teacher of the sage and the teacher of heaven and earth, couldn't teach a junior brother? So, what else did he have to worry about? Luo Fan moved his mind. The purple-yellow light of Wuji Palace shrank slightly and swallowed the huge fruit with a diameter of 30 feet. Then, a purple-yellow ray of light rolled up Luo Fan's body. Then, it rushed diagonally upwards and quickly flew towards the west. After a while, it had rolled up Luo Fan and crossed a distance of nearly 500,000 miles to where Hong Jun was. It had only been less than 2 hours since Luo Fan left Hong Jun. At this time, Hong Jun was still struggling with the surging waves, trying to swim across the river that was 800 miles wide. In less than 2 hours, he had moved less than 10 miles. Looking at Hong Jun, who was trying hard to swim below, Luo Fan didn't want to show up immediately. He planned to train Hong Jun and let Hong Jun get familiar with the situation where he didn't have anyone to rely on. With a thought, the purple-yellow light condensed and shrunk, and the everlasting Void Palace was once again materialized. Then, with another thought, the everlasting Void Palace disappeared into the void. The Wuji Palace was not a magic treasure specialized in concealment. The ability to disappear in the void was not very clever, but it was more than enough to isolate Hong Jun's perception. Standing in the void and observing Hong Jun carefully, Luo Fan's body flashed and went into the Wuji Palace. He went straight into the center of the thunder pool without stopping. On the platform of Yang, where is the limitless boy? After stepping onto the platform, Luo Fan shouted, "Limitless is here. I will listen to Master's orders." Wuji Boy's figure formed in the air and slowly appeared in front of Luo Fan. He bowed with a flat voice. "Follow behind Hong Jun. If Hong Jun's life is in danger, help him and keep him alive. If his life isn't in danger, don't worry about him. Let him train in life and death situations." Luo Fan instructed indifferently. "Understood." The limitless child bowed and replied. Then, his body slowly turned into a void and gradually merged with the entire limitless palace. After Luo Fan gave the order, he was completely relieved. The limitless boy had know your consciousness will naturally carry out all of his orders. He turned his attention to the fruit of the strange tree. Now, because Luo Fan didn't order it to change, the flow of time in the limitless void palace was still maintained at 365 times the speed of the outside world. Therefore, he didn't need to worry about not having enough time, but he wasn't in a hurry. There was plenty of time for him to slowly and meticulously study. After Luo Fan instructed the limitless child to protect Hong Jun, the limitless void palace was suspended at a position of 30 feet above Hong Jun's head. It moved with Hong Jun's movement and stopped when Hong Jun stopped. It was neither too far nor too close, maintaining a constant distance. With the ability of the limitless child, protecting Hong Jun was simply extremely simple and boring. If it wasn't for the fact that the limitless child didn't have any, your consciousness wouldn't know what was boring and what was emotion. It would definitely protest to Luo Fan. The fruit had a diameter of 30 feet, which was nearly 10 meters in diameter. It was oblate and weighed thousands of kilograms. Placed on the platform, Luo Fan's body looked so small under its reflection. With a thought, a section of the mantra flowed in his mind. Following the appearance of this mantra, two dazzling golden lights suddenly burst out from his eyes. Like searchlights, they shone on the huge fruit. As the golden light shone, the structure of the fruit gradually appeared in front of Luo Fan's eyes, layer by layer, without missing anything. This was a kind of supernatural power, similar to the X-ray vision, but it was more mysterious than the X-ray vision. It also had more functions. It couldn't be said that it could look up to the 33 heavens, see the suffering of the human world, and see the underworld, but also had all kinds of power that ordinary people couldn't imagine. It was not a problem to see through the array and see the origin. It's a natural talisman again. That strange tree seems to be quite unique. Luo Fan saw the structure of the fruit clearly and couldn't help but admire it in his heart. The inside of the fruit wasn't any flesh at all. Even the surface of the fruit wasn't made up of fruit skin, but layers upon layers of restrictions made up of countless mysterious talismans. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and the light emitted from his eyes was several times stronger. In the blink of an eye, it shone from the surface of the fruit to the most central part of the fruit. 36 restrictions, and each restriction is made of at least 129,600 talismans. Incredible. In Luo Fan's eyes, there was a huge shadow of a fruit formed by countless talismans. These talismans were naturally drawn by threads condensed from energy, and the energy drawn was a kind of vitality energy. In other words, it was the vitality energy that the strange tree absorbed from all kinds of yuan qi, the essence of the moon, and the nutrients of the earth. This vitality energy was in an awkward position. First of all, it had endless benefits for the growth of the living body. In the future, this fruit might be able to help a practitioner recover from a near-death state 1,000 times. But now, at the beginning of the world, the vitality energy contained in this fruit could at most make the body of an innate god grow a little bigger, and it had no benefits for the growth of an innate god-soul sense. However, these are not the main points. Just like the value of a sculpture, the most precious thing about a sculpture was not the material itself, but the artistic value that the sculpture embodied. The precious thing about this fruit was not the vitality energy contained in it, but the countless talismans. With just a cursory look, Luo Fan was deeply fascinated by the 36 restrictions. He didn't care about the life force energy at all. The 36 restrictions were naturally produced by the strange tree. Each of the talismans made up of them were not rare, nor were they very exquisite. Even Luo Fan himself could recognize 90% of them, and could also fully understand the functions of these 90% of talismans. But the way they were formed seemed to open another door in front of Luo Fan, a door that used a simpler way to refine celestial devices. It turns out that talismans can be used as construction units, and celestial devices can be constructed by building blocks. If the celestial device constructed in this way is well designed, even with ordinary materials, after constructing a certain number of restrictions in it, it will eventually produce a special soul sense, which will eventually make it a magic weapon. This idea echoed in Luo Fan's mind. Just this harvest was enough for Luo Fan to make a promise to accept the strange tree as his disciple. Luo Fan was a little excited, and the golden light in his eyes became more dazzling. The endless operation method of the talismans unfolded in front of him layer by layer. Although there were nearly 10% of the talismans that he did not recognize, Luo Fan was able to understand the specific function of this fruit through the operation rules revealed by all the restrictions throughout the fruit. Chapter 39. Although the innate deity was born of heaven and earth, he was also a living being. As a living being, he naturally had his own way of reproduction. This fruit was the reproduction method of the strange tree. It was also the way that the strange tree gave birth to children. 36 layers of complicated and abstruse restrictive spells possessed all kinds of powers. They could transform the chaotic energy drifting in the world through these restrictive spells, eventually turning it into a mysterious existence that gave birth to a spiritual sense in the core of the fruit. This spiritual consciousness was the descendant of the strange tree, and it inherited everything of the strange tree. It was a pity that the strange tree had an extremely strong demand for primordial chi. Therefore, although the 36 layers of restrictions had been formed and all the functions were complete, there was not enough primordial chi for the fruit to absorb. Apart from the restrictions, there was no subtle spiritual consciousness in the core of the fruit. It was an empty shell. The Void Wuji Palace was filled with a strange primordial chi that was between primordial chi and innate chi. After the formation of the Void Wuji Palace gathered this strange primordial chi, it had already condensed into primordial chi on the platform. Although the content of the gathered primordial chi was very thin, it was primordial chi after all, so it could be absorbed and used by the fruit. The moment the fruit arrived, it began to crazily absorb all the primordial chi around it. It tried its best to absorb the primordial chi into the center of the fruit and turn it into a spiritual consciousness. Luo Fan saw the change of the fruit and sighed in his heart. It was a pity that the fruit could not grow. Although it already had primordial chi, it did not have the guidance of the strange tree. Therefore, even if it absorbed the primordial chi and produced a spiritual consciousness, it was only a kind of spiritual consciousness that was equivalent to a treasure spirit. It had wisdom, perception, and thought, but it did not have self-consciousness. It could not be called a complete living being. In the untainted land, there were many living beings, but there were also few living beings. There were countless innate gods in the world as a whole, as well as countless plants and vegetation. It was because the primordial world was too vast. There were so many innate gods and plants scattered throughout the entire primordial world, which made it seem extremely rare. Luo Fan had been here for tens of thousands of years. The only creatures with complete spiritual awareness that he had seen were Hongjun and the strange tree. The creatures above the layer of gang wind, thunder, and fire were another form of life, which was not in the scope of discussion. Please look forward to the details later. Now, seeing that the creature that could have a complete spiritual awareness could not be produced because of the lack of conditions, he could not help but feel a little regretful. However, although it was a pity, he didn't have the intention to make up for it. If he replaced the strange tree to incubate, the fruit, the spiritual consciousness produced, would be equivalent to his children. He hadn't enjoyed it enough, so he absolutely didn't want to. With a gentle wave of his hand, an invisible force exploded from the inside of the fruit. Under the effect of this terrifying explosive force, the entire fruit disintegrated with a loud bang and expanded 100 times. It turned into an oblate ball-shaped formation that was wrapped up by 36 layers of talismans. It was over 3,000 feet in size and glittered with golden light. It was like a huge golden sun that floated above his head. One after another, extremely complicated runes flashed in Luo Fan's eyes. They intertwined and overlapped with each other, eventually forming layers of restrictions. The outermost layer was composed of 129,600 talismans. The second layer was smaller, but the number of talismans was doubled, reaching 259,200, which was double the number of the outermost layer. The third layer further in, the number of talismans increased again by 129,600, reaching a total of 388,400 talismans. In this way, the number of talismans that formed the restriction would increase by 129,600 with every layer. Waiting till the very end, the restrictive spell had shrunk to a diameter of only 3 feet, but the number of talismans formed by it had actually reached a terrifying number of 4,665,600. And in the middle of these talismans, there was a small, mysterious spiritual light that was trembling like a heartbeat. Strands of chaotic energy constantly passed through the layers of restrictions and underwent various mysterious changes as they were injected into it. This caused the spiritual light to constantly grow imperceptibly. This was obviously the predecessor of the spiritual consciousness of the fruit. Luo Fan looked at the layers of restrictions, and his heart couldn't help but move. The 36 layers of restrictions were imprinted into his mind, and they were constantly broken down and reorganized. After imprinting all the talismans into his mind, Luo Fan slowly closed his eyes and focused all his attention on the countless talismans. The results of his cultivation over the past 3,000 years suddenly flashed through his mind and intertwined with these talismans. Gradually, some kind of mysterious sublimation was produced. All the talismans quickly disintegrated and reorganized. Gradually, tens of thousands of complicated characters and thousands of diagrams appeared in his mind. These countless talismans eventually turned into a set of incomparably profound and exquisite magic arts. This technique, let's call it the Hercules summoning technique. Luo Fan opened his eyes. Countless words and diagrams flashed through his eyes as he spoke in an extremely calm tone. As he spoke, the golden talisman ball that was originally like a sun above his head began to spin rapidly. A crisp, rustling sound came from it, and the golden ball quickly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it had already shrunk to its original size, which was the shape of a fruit that was 30 feet wide. Boom! With a muffled sound, the fruit suddenly fell straight into the lightning pool and gradually sank to the bottom. The huge movement caused the lightning pool to ripple, and it only calmed down after a long time. I don't want to have a child, so I can only suppress you at the bottom of the pool. I hope that before your mother arrives, you haven't turned into a treasure spirit. Luo Fan sighed and said leisurely. After the Hercules summoning technique was formed, his understanding of the fruit deepened. This made him understand that the strange tree was equivalent to the fruit's mother. If he used his will to guide and help the fruit's consciousness become complete, then he would also become its father. Understanding this, he almost broke out in a sweat. He felt very grateful for his previous decision. The Hercules summoning technique could be said to be a summoning technique, but it could also be said to be a refining technique. The wonder of it was that it could be used to refine the legendary yellow turban Hercules. With his mind silently reciting the mantra of the Hercules summoning technique, Luo Fan raised his right hand and made a grabbing motion. In the distance, a mountain peak that was 100 feet tall seemed to be taken by an invisible force. It shook off the rocks and soil that were connected to the mountain and slowly floated up. In this small world, Luo Fan was almost omnipotent. Taking a mountain like this was done smoothly and effortlessly. Even shaking off the rocks did not cause much damage to the surrounding terrain, and it did not consume any of his strength. He withdrew his right hand, and the mountain peak quickly rose up. In the blink of an eye, it was already diagonally above him. With a thought from Luo Fan, the Earth Immortal Tao fruit slightly shook. A small magical power unit separated from it and rushed out of his dantian. It quickly circulated according to the route of the Hercules summoning technique. After 9 cycles, the insignificant magical power unit turned into a yellow aura. This aura gathered in the palm of his right hand and constantly pulsed. It was as if there was a heart buried in his palm, constantly beating. Without the slightest hesitation, Luo Fan raised his hand and patted the air in the direction of the mountain peak. The yellow aura rushed out of his palm and instantly crossed space, completely entering the mountain peak. As the yellow aura entered, the mountain peak began to shake violently. Countless substances in the mountain peak were refined and removed, and its volume continued to shrink. The entire mountain began to emit a hazy yellow light. The yellow light condensed into countless mysterious and complicated talismans outside the mountain, swimming and changing. Gradually, they formed a layer of talismans that was both familiar and strange at the same time. It was similar to the outermost restrictive spell of the fruit, but it was also fundamentally different. After the restriction was formed, it quickly shrank. At the same time, it produced an extremely mysterious force that caused the mountain to shrink and deform. In the blink of an eye, the mountain peak had shrunk into 10 large yellow-skinned men that were 1 meter tall. The restriction was divided into 10 parts that directly entered the bodies of the 10 large men and disappeared without a trace. Yellow Turban Soldier A. See, Gung, Exit, Run, Huang Turban Soldier, Exit, Run, greets Master. After the 10 big men formed, they knelt on the platform and shouted loudly. Chapter 40. Unfortunately, after all, it is only made of ordinary mountain stones, but it can't bear even one more enchantment. The strength of these yellow scarf warriors is quite low. Luo Fan sighed in his heart. While sighing, his earth immortal Tao fruit shook slightly, and a three-dimensional talisman appeared out of thin air. It instantly replenished the spiritual power unit that had been turned into yellow light. The three-dimensional talisman that constituted the Earth Immortal Tao fruit instantly returned to the complete number of 129,600. He raised his hand and waved gently, and the 10 yellow scarf warriors stood up without any expression. These 10 big men had yellowish skin, messy long hair, and a yellow ribbon wrapped around their foreheads. They wore a short shirt that exposed the right shoulder and a pair of yellow trousers that were suitable for activity. The muscles all over their body were bulging, and they looked quite strong and powerful. Their image was exactly what Luo Fan imagined about the yellow scarf warriors. However, these yellow scarf warriors seemed to be alive, but in fact they were just a kind of robot-like existence. They didn't even have thoughts. Compared to the Limitless Boy, they were many times worse. The yellow scarf warriors, refined by the summoning secrets of the strongman, were divided into 36 levels. Every time a layer of enchantment was refined, its level would be increased. These 10 yellow scarf warriors only refined one layer of enchantment. Even the lowest level yellow scarf warrior could only do some trivial things such as cleaning, moving things, washing clothes, and cooking. Their strength was no more than 3 times that of an adult strongman. However, this was enough. Luo Fan didn't want these yellow scarf warriors to help him fight. It was enough to help with some trivial things. Although he was almost omnipotent in this lesser kiliacosm, and he could clean up any place in the palace with just a thought, he could do it. But he was the master of a mini kiliacosm. Did he have to clean these things every day? That was simply a waste of life. Limitless Boy arranged for the 10 of them to manage the Lingju Palace. Luo Fan said in an indifferent tone, "Yes." The voice of the Limitless Boy was extremely ethereal, as if it was the answer of the whole world. This was the situation when he integrated into the Limitless Palace. As soon as the Limitless Boy finished his words, the 10 yellow scarf warriors disappeared in an instant. When they reappeared, they were scattered in various positions in the Lingju Palace. The yellow scarf warriors and the Limitless Boy were essentially the same, but the Limitless Boy had wisdom and thought. Apart from not having self-awareness, they were no different from the Limitless Boy. Not to mention, this was the lowest level yellow turban strongman. Even the highest level yellow turban strongman with 36 restrictions would only have half of the Limitless Boy's level of wisdom. Unless it could become a magic treasure, it would not be comparable to the Limitless Boy at all. Therefore, they needed the Limitless Boy to arrange their work, and the Limitless Boy was also able to arrange their work. After these 10 yellow turban strongmen were in place, it seemed that Limitless Boy had already infused all the knowledge they needed into their spiritual senses. Therefore, they did not hesitate at all and immediately began to get busy. Those who cleaned, moved, and watered were all very conscientious. The Zenith Palace, which had not been cleaned for more than 3,000 years, finally received its first cleaning since its creation at this moment. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly. He already knew that the yellow turban strongman had arranged everything properly, so he put this matter to the back of his mind. The Hercules summoning technique is quite wonderful, But I wonder how powerful a yellow turban Hercules with 36 restrictions would be. Luo Fan had some doubts in his heart, but at the same time, he was eager to give it a try. Even though this cultivation method was created by him, it was just a fantasy after all. He wasn't very clear about the intricacies of this cultivation method. Since he had all the time in the world, he didn't hesitate. Since he wanted to know, he might as well do it. With a thought, with the help of the Limitless Void Palace's super strong amplification effect on perception, he had already checked all the terrain within 1,000,000 miles. The ground had a strong blocking effect on perception. After being amplified, his perception could sweep within 1,000,000 miles, but after aiming at the ground, he could only perceive the depth of 500 miles. It was reduced by 1,000 times. 1,000,000 miles was equivalent to a ball with a diameter of 1,000,000 miles. The maximum range of perception in all directions was 500,000 miles. It was weakened by 1,000 times. Although this made Luo Fan feel a little regretful, it was still quite amazing. In the blink of an eye, within 1,000,000 miles, the situation of all the depths of the ground appeared in Luo Fan's mind. The underground resources were quite rich. There were countless refining materials such as iron, copper, earth, crystal, and so on. Using his mind to perceive, Luo Fan was almost dazzled. There are hundreds of primal chaos origin energy sources. It's really a great treasure. Luo Fan exclaimed inwardly as he paid attention to the underground scene in his mind. Unfortunately, among these hundreds of chaotic vitality sources, he didn't feel any signs of the existence of chaotic vitality stones. This made him feel slightly regretful. Originally, when he found so many chaotic vitality sources, he planned to use the mystery of chaotic vitality stones to sacrifice and refine a magic treasure, level yellow turban strongman. After a careful inspection, he had already determined his target. With a slight thought, his figure flashed, and he was already out of the limitless void palace. Looking down in midair, Hongjun was still fighting against the turbulent water. But now he had completely immersed himself in it. He had completely forgotten everything in the outside world. An aura of enlightenment gradually emanated from his body. It was a kind of enlightenment that he could abandon everything in order to pursue his goal. He could even abandon his life. Looking at Hongjun, Luo Fan suddenly felt excited. With a slight thought, a kind of enlightenment was born in his heart. It turns out that in order for Hongjun to achieve Tao fruit, he needs to go through 9 tribulations. Along with this enlightenment, countless complex characters flowed through his mind and eventually turned into a mantra that floated in his mind, drifting erratically. This was a kind of mantra to calculate the secrets of heaven, yin-yang test method. Because the world had just been created, yin-yang had just been judged, and the secrets of heaven were not revealed, so the power of this method was only ordinary. In those 3,000 years, after trying hundreds of times without any results, he had already thrown it aside. At this moment, he had some enlightenment in his heart, so he took it out again. With the appearance of this mantra, he pinched his fingers and calculated. Layers of light and shadow flashed in front of him. In an instant, he had already calculated that the first tribulation that Hongjun would go through would be 3 years later. It seems that I have to find a magic tool for Hongjun to protect himself. That magic tool embryo is barely enough to protect him, but it's still not enough for him to go through the tribulations. Luo Fan thought to himself, since he had already become Hongjun's master, he needed to plan for him. What's more, Hongjun had sworn to serve him for life and never betray him. Naturally, he could not treat Hongjun badly. At this time, there was not much of a problem with Hongjun's strength, but in terms of attack and defense, he was far from enough. Although the tribulation 3 years later was not as good as when he achieved the Earth Immortal Tao fruit, it was not something that Hongjun could go through with his own strength. With this idea in mind, Luo Fan instantly made changes to his plan. He didn't show himself. Instead, he turned around and transformed into an invisible streak of light, flying toward the southeast alone. He did not use the power of the Void Wuji Palace, but only relied on his own supernatural power. This flying speed was more than twice as fast as when he rode on the clouds. This long rainbow was a minor divine ability that he had cultivated in the past 3,000 years. Luo Fan's destination was 280,000 miles to the southeast. The speed of the long rainbow was quite amazing. In an instant, he had already arrived at his destination. Standing in the void, he observed the surrounding situation and compared it with the information that the Void Wuji Palace had sensed in his mind. In the blink of an eye, he knew where the item he wanted was. Chapter 41. The location that Luo Fan chose was an ancient forest that was rarely seen in the Untainted Land. This forest covered an area of about 1,000 miles, which was not very wide. But there were ancient trees that were hundreds of thousands of feet high everywhere. Looking up, they were all huge, ancient trees that could not be hugged tightly by two people towering into the sky. Among these towering ancient trees, although none of them could compare to the strange tree that had spiritual awareness, but there were still quite a few that were a bit inferior, a bit shorter. However, among these towering ancient trees, no matter how huge they were, no matter how close they were to the strange tree with spiritual awareness, none of them had spiritual awareness. Not even a trace, the weakest seed of spiritual awareness. When Luo Fan perceived this location through the Void Wuji Palace, he already knew the reason. At this time, looking here again, he was not surprised. The formation of this forest was completely different from the strange tree with spiritual awareness that Luo Fan had encountered before. At the beginning of the world, the primordial energy had undergone some kind of mysterious and profound transformation, and it had given birth to a seed. This seed had then continuously absorbed the primordial energy, and finally, it had grown to its current state. But this forest was different. This whole ancient forest was formed by the combination of the first wood essence and the primordial chi. The first wood essence was distributed to the ground through countless small channels hundreds of miles deep underground. During this process, the first wood essence in every passageway underwent some sort of mysterious transformation. It absorbed a huge amount of natural chi and transformed into numerous ancient trees, clumps of flowers and grasses. In the end, this ancient forest was formed. The vegetation on the untainted land, whether it was flowers, plants, or trees, no matter how precious the natural treasures were, most of them were formed by various kinds of wood essence, such as the existence of the first wood essence, the existence of the second wood essence, combined with other 5 elements essence, and then absorbed the primordial chi. For example, some plants were formed by the combination of the essence of wood and the essence of earth, such as the essence of earth and the essence of earth. Some plants were formed by the combination of the essence of wood and the essence of fire, such as the essence of fire and the essence of fire. Similar to this, there were also the combinations of the essence of wood and the essence of fire, such as the essence of wood and metal, wood and water, wood and water, wood and fire and earth, and so on and so forth. The different types, quantities, and ratios of the essence of the 5 elements combined to form the first batch of hundreds of millions of strange plants with different effects and powers in the primordial world. After the first batch of plants were formed, they continue to multiply and extend for hundreds of thousands of years. Only then did they form the primordial world that was full of vitality today. These plants looked exactly the same as the plants that were born from chaotic yuan qi, but they had a huge weakness. That was, for this kind of plant that was formed from the combination of the essence of the 5 elements, it was thousands of times more difficult to produce spiritual consciousness than the plants that were born from the primordial chi. It could be said that it was impossible for them to produce spiritual consciousness if they did not have great luck or great fortune. The ancient forest in front of Luo Fan was transformed from the pure essence of the first wood, absorbing the innate vitality. Naturally, it was also a plant formed by the essence of the 5 elements. Therefore, there were so many ancient trees in this forest that had the conditions to produce spiritual consciousness, but none of them could produce spiritual consciousness. The reason why Luo Fan chose to come here was not for this forest. Instead, it was for the essence of the first wood 100 miles below the forest. This essence of the first wood was very huge. It had been hundreds of thousands of years since the beginning of the world, but it still had not transformed into this forest. Most of the essence of the first wood was still left 100 miles below the ground. The huge amount of the remaining essence was quite rare. Luo Fan's mind moved, and his body rushed straight down. When he was about to touch the ground, a mantra flowed through his mind. As the mantra flowed through his mind, his body slightly changed, and like a phantom, he rushed into the ground. During the whole process, the ground didn't block him in the slightest. This kind of magical power was a small magical power that Luo Fan had cultivated for more than 3,000 years. Earth Escape. Using the Earth Escape magical power to walk underground, the feeling was like wandering in the water, very mysterious and very comfortable. Although the speed would be slowed down, it was still extremely fast. In a short time, Luo Fan's figure had come to the ground 100 miles below the ground. The essence of the first would suddenly appeared in front of him. This was a spherical space with a diameter of 150 feet. A green sphere was suspended in the center of this spherical space. It was about 120 feet in diameter, filled with green mist like a sea urchin. There were traces of green mist emitted from it and poured into countless small channels around it. With a move of his mind, 2 golden lights were released from Luo Fan's eyes and shone on the green sphere. In an instant, the structure of the entire sphere appeared in Luo Fan's eyes. This green sphere was completely composed of pure first wood essence. The first wood essence, with a diameter of 100 feet, was completely condensed into a solid crystalline form. The outer 20 feet thick first wood essence was between the gaseous and liquid state, like smoke. Compared with the great immortal in this spherical space, Luo Fan knew that this first wood essence should originally have a diameter of 150 feet, and it should be solid crystalline. Obviously, after more than 100,000 years of volatilization, nearly 1/3 of the first wood essence had turned into the ancient forest above. Understanding this, Luo Fan could not help but secretly feel pity. Putting away the clairvoyant magical ability, he raised his right hand and pointed to the first wood essence. The earth immortal Tao fruit in the lower abdomen suddenly broke out of a magical power unit, flowed along the meridians, rushed out of his right hand, and flew toward the first wood essence. It grew with the wind and flew bigger and bigger. When it approached the first wood essence, this dust-like magical power unit had become a 3-dimensional talisman with a height of 10 feet and the shape of Buzhou Mountain. This 3-dimensional talisman came to the edge of the first wood essence, suddenly turned, with the bottom facing the first wood essence, and, at the same time, there was a strong attraction. The huge first wood essence seemed to be compressed and pulled by an invisible giant hand. It quickly moved toward the 3-dimensional talisman, and, in the process of moving, it continued to become smaller. When it came into contact with the 3-dimensional talisman, its size had shrunk to the size of a basketball. It could no longer resist the strong attraction of the 3-dimensional talisman and floated into the 3-dimensional talisman. After the 3-dimensional talisman absorbed the first wood essence, it quickly became smaller. In the blink of an eye, it turned into the size of a speck of dust. With a quick rush, it rushed straight into the body of Luo Fan. This was a storage method that Luo Fan had studied for a long time. This was the first experiment, and the result was obviously very satisfactory. Turning his head and looking around, there was nothing particularly noteworthy in this area of 150 feet. Luo Fan once again used the Earth Escape technique and drilled up. In a short time, he had returned to the ground. Hanging in the air, looking down, the ancient forest below had changed slightly. Originally, this forest exuded vitality, but at this time, it had become gloomy, as if it had entered old age and was about to die. "I'm sorry," Luo Fan sighed in his heart. He knew that what he had done was to cut off the chance for the forest to have a spiritual sense. Originally, if this first wood essence existed, the difficulty of the ancient trees in this forest to produce spiritual awareness was high to the point of being close to impossible. But after all, there was still a slight chance. Now that the nourishment of the first wood essence was lost, this slight chance was completely cut off. Although he sighed, he did not hesitate. He turned around, turned into a rainbow, and flew toward the northwest direction. In an instant, he returned to the place where the Void Wuji Palace was hidden. With a move of his mind, he had already entered the Void Wuji Palace that was hidden in the air. After sitting on the platform, he raised his hand and waved. The spiritual power unit that collected the first wood essence rushed out of his body. With a rotation, the first wood essence was released, and it floated in front of him. This first wood essence should be able to withstand 36 enchantments. If it is used to refine the Yellow Turban Strongman, it can definitely refine the highest level of the Yellow Turban Strongman. If I arrange some means on it, it will be enough to serve as the treasure of Hongjuan's calamity. Luo Fan pondered in his heart. Chapter 42. After Luo Fan carefully thought about it, he made a decision. He raised his hand and pointed at the first wood crystal. The spirit space was slightly distorted, and the 120 feet first wood crystal collapsed with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a green cloud that was tens of acres in size. It floated up until it was 100 feet above Luo Fan's head and kept rolling. The Apex Palace was located at the peak of a towering mountain. It was 100 feet above Luo Fan's head, and naturally, it was above this mountain. From afar, this dark green cloud was like a canopy that covered the peak of the mountain. It surged and changed, and it looked rather spectacular. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and the mantra of the Hercules summoning secrets flowed through his mind. In the earthly immortal's Tao fruit, in an instant, there were 666 units of spiritual power that suddenly broke away, condensed into a ball, and followed the route of the Hercules summoning secrets to quickly flow in the meridians of his body. After these 666 units of spiritual power went through 9 cycles, they could no longer maintain the shape of the spiritual power unit. They suddenly exploded, and their volume soared by 10,000 times, turning into a yellow light. This yellow light circulated in his body and gradually gathered in the palm of his right hand. With the gathering of this yellow light, his right palm gradually emitted a faint yellow light, and in the process, there was a slight vibration, as if there was a powerful heart beating in the palm of his hand. An indescribable vitality radiated from his palm. The entire thunder pool was shrouded in this vitality, and it seemed to be more agile. Luo Fan's eyes flashed. He raised his right hand and patted towards the sky. A beam of light suddenly spurted out from his palm and rushed straight up to 1,000 feet into the sky. Then, it directly rushed into the dozens of acres of dark green clouds. After the yellow light entered the dark green cloud, it instantly disappeared. On the other hand, the dark green cloud seemed to be stirred by an invisible force, creating an indescribable chaos. After that, countless strands of yellow light tore apart the dark green cloud like strands of laser light. They shot out from the dark green cloud and condensed around it. They constantly twisted, swam, condensed, and purified. In the end, they transformed into 129,600 complicated and profound talismans. These complex and mysterious eels interweaved together under a very mysterious mechanism, forming a restriction that Luo Fan was very familiar with. The first restriction of the Yellow Turban Strongman. After this restriction was completely formed, it suddenly shrunk. The dark green cloud that was enveloped by this restriction seemed to be under an irresistible and terrifying pressure, and at the same time, it contracted violently. The speed at which it shrunk was extremely fast. In just a few breaths, the entire jade green cloud that was dozens of acres in size had shrunk to a radius of 30 feet. Furthermore, under the effect of the restriction, it was constantly twisting and changing shape, gradually condensing into a rough and simple human figure. The yellow light on its surface flowed, and the 129,600 talismans shuttled and swam in it. All kinds of unspeakable mysteries were constantly reflected in this process. Then, the humanoid first-wood spirit that was wrapped in the restriction sank down. In the blink of an eye, it had come to the front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan looked at the first wood essence, and once again raised his right hand and patted it. Another yellow light rushed out of his right hand and quickly shuttled and condensed in the air. Finally, it turned into 259,200 talismans, constructing a more complicated and more mysterious restriction. After this restriction was formed, it did not stop at all. It directly went into the first wood spirit that was wrapped in the restriction. In an instant, the first wood spirit underwent another drastic change. The whole humanoid first wood spirit shrank a circle, and its surface trembled, expanding and contracting, as if there was an extra heart in it. Luo Fan did not stop. He raised his hand and continued to make noises. A stream of yellow light rushed out of his hand and condensed into a layer of restriction in the air. It was continuously slammed into the first wood spirit. 36 restrictions. After an unknown amount of time, Luo Fan had continuously slammed a total of 36 restrictions into the first wood spirit. Among these 36 restrictions, each restriction was more complicated and mysterious than the previous one. Not to mention anything else, just the number of talismans that made up this restriction was 129,600 more than the previous one. When it came to the last restriction, its complexity had reached an unimaginable level. Even Luo Fan, if he were to look at it with his own eyes, would feel dizzy and his vision blur because of the 36th restriction, and he would feel dizzy and dizzy. 86,313,600 talismans. This was the number of talismans composed of the 36th restriction. When this last restriction rushed straight into the first wood spirit, the first wood spirit suddenly burst out with an extremely strong yellow light. Along with this yellow light, there was a thump, 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 thump. The sound of a heartbeat came from the center of the yellow light. Yang came out. There was a mysterious and indescribable feeling of mystery coming from the center of the yellow light. It was as if an earth-shattering existence was being nurtured within. Just when the yellow light reached its peak, it was like the sun shining through the entire dangling Jew palace. Because of the obstruction of the surrounding walls of the palace, it could not spread. It could only soar into the sky and form a light pillar. A little bit of green, full of vitality, appeared in the middle of the yellow light. When Yang appeared, it gradually dyed all the yellow light. After an unknown amount of time, the yellow light pillar that soared into the sky was dyed into a warm, jade-like yellow-green. It was filled with endless mystery, and there was an endless sense of illusion coming from it. On the side of the yellow turban, the golden ring shines brilliantly. In the middle of the embroidered robe, the frost armor swallows the shadow of the moon, always guarding the altar every time I come to the world to subdue the devil. Suddenly, a deep and resounding voice resounded between heaven and earth. Along with this voice, the warm, jade-like yellow-green light pillar that soared into the sky collapsed with a loud bang. It turned into specks of yellow-green light scattered in all directions and gradually disappeared between heaven and earth. At the same time, a big man slowly appeared in front of Luo Fan. This big man was about 10 feet tall. His skin was slightly yellow, and his forehead was wrapped with a yellow ribbon. He wore a silver sleeveless armor. His feet were bare, and he held a huge and heavy golden ring in his right hand. His muscles were bulging, and he was strong to the extreme. He stood there, mighty to the extreme. After this big man appeared, he knelt on the ground, bowed his body, and said, "The Yellow Turban Emperor greets Master." Luo Fan looked at the big man in front of him, whose appearance was completely different from A, B, C, D, the 10 yellow turban warriors. He nodded in his heart. Whether it was his appearance or strength, he was very satisfied. The 36 layers of restrictions were indeed not given for nothing. The strength of this yellow turban warrior was quite amazing. Just his strength alone was more than 100,000 pounds. He could also ride on the clouds, pass through mountains and cross the sea, and was impervious to water and fire. Just looking at his strength, he had already reached a critical point between achieving Tao fruit and not achieving Tao fruit. Precisely, his strength had already reached the super strength of a cultivator who was about to achieve Tao fruit. As for this yellow turban warrior with 36 layers of restrictions calling himself an emperor, Luo Fan did not have much of an opinion. At the very least, this yellow turban warrior was indeed the most powerful and mysterious existence among the yellow turban warriors. It was enough to be called an emperor. Chapter 43. Place these 10,000 talismans in your heart and refine a restriction. Luo Fan did not say much. He raised his hand and pointed, and a spiritual light shot out and rushed into the head of the yellow turban strongman emperor. This yellow turban strongman was a very mysterious existence. Although it was made of refining materials, energy, and restrictions, its body still had all the organs that a human body should have. However, the difference was that the composition of these organs was no longer the flesh and blood of ordinary people. Instead, they were composed of talismans and lines of energy. The spiritual light that Luo Fan transmitted into the head of the yellow turban strongman emperor contained tens of thousands of complicated and mysterious talismans, and there was a method to construct a restriction with these talismans. Among these talismans, 80% were comprehended by Luo Fan from the leaves of the strange tree. In addition, the remaining 20% were comprehended from various wonderful techniques in his memory. At that time, when Luo Fan first saw the strange tree, he found that the leaves of the strange tree were quite mysterious. The veins on the leaves actually formed an extremely complicated and mysterious talisman. The natural talisman on the leaves had the ability that Luo Fan needed at this time. It could absorb the free energy of the outside world and transform it into a kind of vitality energy that was infinitely beneficial to the body. This vitality energy was exactly what Hong Jun needed to go through the retribution. The natural talisman on the leaves was quite complicated. With the countless techniques in his memory as a reference, it was not difficult for Luo Fan to change this complicated talisman into a restriction. In particular, this talisman was originally composed of thousands of simple talismans. Just like a Chinese character was composed of several simpler Chinese characters. It was even easier to change it. After various modifications and creations, the restriction contained in the spiritual light that Luo Fan emitted had the power to absorb energy, transform energy, and open up space. As long as the yellow turban strongman emperor refined this restriction in his heart, he would be able to continuously convert energy from his body and the outside world into vitality energy and store it. He would also be able to open up a space of certain size at the location of his heart. Apart from that, he could also turn his entire body invisible and attach himself to his master. The reason why Luo Fan didn't place this restriction on him earlier was because this restriction was very special. It would be too wasteful to refine it on him directly. As a matter of fact, the power of this restriction would increase with the increase of Ri during the sacrificial refining. In other words, as the refinement time increased, this restriction would produce more and more life energy, and the rate at which it was produced would also increase. Moreover, the space opened up would only grow larger and larger. One could imagine that if it was refined for an immeasurable amount of time, then this restriction would definitely become a boundless small world. With such a quality restriction, there was naturally no need to say how to choose the sacrificial refinement method. The yellow turban Hercules Emperor accepted this little bit of inspiration. His expression did not change, and his eyes did not change in the slightest. Without self-consciousness, he was just like a robot. No matter how strange and incredible the things he encountered, he would not be moved. After staying there for a while, the yellow turban Hercules Emperor was interpreting the inspiration from Luo Fan, and then said, "I will obey Master's order." Luo Fan shook his head slightly and said, "I am not your master. After 1,000 years, I will find another master for you." The yellow turban Hercules Emperor's voice remained unchanged. Yes. Luo Fan also knew that it was a waste of time to talk about feelings with the yellow turban Hercules Emperor. He raised his hand and moved through the void. The yellow turban Hercules Emperor had already disappeared. He was moved to a training room in the side hall of the Peak Hall. After the yellow turban Hercules Emperor came to the training room, he stood there with a dull expression. His eyes were closed, and his body began to emit layers of green light. These green lights were twisted and turbulent. There seemed to be countless mysterious lines appearing, disappearing, shuttling, and entangling. This was the yellow turban Hercules Emperor starting to refine the restriction in his heart. The 1,000 years that Luo Fan mentioned naturally refer to the time in this small world. If it was changed to the time of the untainted land, it was only equivalent to more than 2 years, less than 3 years. According to Luo Fan's calculations, by that time, it was almost time for Hong Jun to cross the tribulation. Luo Fan's mind moved, and his mind reflected on the outside world. After observing for a while, he found nothing wrong, so he slowly retracted his perception and began to continue cultivating. Although it was easy to collect the essence of the first wood this time, it also exposed some of his weaknesses. For example, he used the magic power units to store the essence of the first wood, which was very inconvenient and cumbersome. It was completely undesirable. Originally, Luo Fan felt that there was such a boundless small world inside the Void Wuji Palace, so there was no need to worry about storage at all. With the Void Wuji Palace, even a mountain could contain it. But now, he knew how wrong this idea was. Although the Void Wuji Palace was his magic weapon, he could not always bring it with him. If he did not cultivate other magical powers and only use the magic power units to store things, it was both inconvenient and not elegant. The world in the sleeve seems to be good. Well, the moon in the chest seems to work. The world in the palm also has its advantages. Luo Fan rummaged through his memory and began to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of various spells. Panga's original spirit was very dutiful. Before it dissipated, almost all the wonderful ideas in Luo Fan's memory were realized in various ways. After a careful examination, Luo Fan found that in his memory, there were as many as 36 spells to open up the void. Among them, each was very exquisite, had its advantages but also had its weaknesses, making it really difficult to choose. The world in the sleeve. After rummaging for a while, Luo Fan, who could not decide, could only choose the most famous one at random, which was the magical power that first emerged in his memory. Thinking about it, if he were to take a fancy to something, all he had to do was spread out his sleeves, and the thing that was the size of a small mountain would be sucked into his sleeves, and the space in front of him would become as empty as a field. The world in the sleeve was a spell, a magical power, in which a large number of talismans were placed on one sleeve, and eventually a void of a certain size was opened up. The size of this created void would increase along with the refiner's cultivation. After the void was opened up, it could be controlled at will, and any dead things could be kept at will. It could also be kept in creatures that were weaker than cultivators. However, this kind of magic, this magical power, had a shortcoming, which was that it was extremely picky about the refining materials. If he wanted to increase its size, he would need to add some precious refining materials. It was not like the moon in the chest and the world in the palm, which didn't need any materials. As long as the body was healthy, it could be refined and expanded continuously. However, this was not a problem for Luo Fan. Luo Fan's black and brown robe was directly smashed and tempered by the cloud-shaped life formed by the Gung Jin Divine Thunder and Ewood Heavenly Fire in the fourth layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. It was said to be a robe, but it was actually a pure, condensed energy. Its composition material was quite advanced. Although it was far inferior to the Primordial Chaos Stone and the first wood, it was enough to open up a void on it. Luo Fan's mind moved, and countless talismans flowed through his mind and mind. They followed his mind and directly imprinted into his left sleeve. When these talismans were imprinted on it, the Gung Jin Divine Lightning and the Ewood Heavenly Fire that formed the sleeve instantly collapsed, turning into a ball of black and brown clouds that covered his hand, covering his elbow to his wrist. Then, the light flickered, and this large group of black and brown clouds shuttled and condensed, twisting and entangling. Finally, like silk woven into silk, it was woven into a sleeve that looked exactly the same as before. However, If one looked at it with the divine eyes that could see through the origin, they would find that the internal structure of the sleeve was completely different from before. The sleeve that was originally condensed into one was filled with thousands of complex and mysterious talismans. These talismans were intertwined and finally opened up a space with a radius of 10,000 feet in this sleeve. Luo Fan's performance was very relaxed, as if nothing had happened. The sacrificial refining of the universe in the sleeve was not the slightest pressure for him, because he did not use any of his own strength at all. The opening of this void was entirely with the help of the energy of this sleeve. What Luo Fan consumed was at most a little bit of his mental strength. His mind moved slightly, and he secretly felt the space of the universe in the sleeve. Luo Fan could not help but sigh. It is a little small, but it is barely enough. Chapter 44. 1,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. When this happened, a powerful life force suddenly shot up into the sky. The life force shone with a dark green light and formed a pillar of light that shot up into the sky. Luo Fan opened his eyes that had been closed for 1,000 years. 2 golden lights flashed. Looking at the source of the light, he understood what was going on. It turned out that the Yellow Turban Emperor had spent 1,000 years to complete the sacrificial refining of the restriction. Moreover, all the energy in his body was transformed into boundless vitality. This beam of light was the scene of the eruption of the vitality energy. The Yellow Turban Emperor suddenly opened his eyes, raised his hands high, and roared. As he roared, the pillar of light in the sky that connected heaven and earth suddenly retracted. In the blink of an eye, it had completely retracted and entered his body. Luo Fan carefully perceived it and already knew that there was a complicated restriction on the Yellow Turban Emperor's heart. The restriction was composed of tens of thousands of talismans. Every 2 talismans had a mysterious connection between them. When tens of thousands of talismans were combined, it was extremely complex and mysterious. Within the talisman was a space that was neither too big nor too small. It was 3,000 meters in circumference, and it was vast and desolate. However, it was completely empty, and it was like a vacuum. The first wood essence in the body of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor had been completely transformed into green vitality energy under the heavy restriction of the heart. Its appearance seemed to be similar to the previous first wood essence, but its nature had completely changed. After the green vitality energy appeared, it flowed through the meridians of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. It was transformed, compressed, and condensed by the countless talismans wrapped around the meridians, becoming purer and more condensed. Luo Fan gently waved his hand, and the Yellow Turban Emperor was deterred by an invisible force. The Yellow Turban Emperor moved through the void and appeared in front of him in an instant. When the Yellow Turban Emperor saw Luo Fan, he cupped his hands and bowed, but did not speak. The Yellow Turban Emperor had been sacrificially refined to the 36th restriction. It was only one step away from becoming a magic treasure. It already had some intelligence, some thoughts, and some feelings. Although it had no self-consciousness, it could also be regarded as a living creature in some aspects. It could naturally accurately judge the situation and know when to speak and when not to speak. Luo Fan's thoughts cut into the body of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. With a thought, the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor turned into a dark green stream of air and rushed straight into his body. It exploded and swept through every part of his body, including every cell. It looked as if a membrane had been added to every part of his body and every cell. Whether it was his meridians, blood vessels, internal organs, muscles, or bones, nothing could escape from this membrane. Sensing the ability of this membrane, Luo Fan knew that this membrane had no defensive ability. Its function was more to repair those parts of the body after they were injured. Sure enough, as I expected, although it had only one ability, Luo Fan was very satisfied. This was what he needed. A magic treasure for tribulation transcendence did not necessarily need to have a strong defensive ability. Tribulation was a process in which the energy in the body developed to a certain extent and triggered some kind of energy in the world, causing it to riot and cause it to attack the cultivator. This process was actually a process of tempering the energy in the body and the body itself. If he used an arcane artifact to defend against this attack and isolate it from his body, you would indeed be able to easily pass through the tribulation. However, the energy within his body and the body itself would lose a chance to temper and train. It would not be perfect. This was also the reason why Luo Fan could easily eliminate Hongjuan's tribulation, but he had to sacrifice the magic treasure for Hongjun to pass the tribulation. Luo Fan felt the power of this yellow turban Hercules Emperor and was very satisfied. With a thought, the membrane that covered every cell and every part of his body suddenly rushed out from all the acupuncture points in his body and left his body. In the blink of an eye, a yellow turban Hercules Emperor with a height of 3 meters condensed in front of him. Goddess E was calm and indifferent. 1,000 years had passed in the mini Kiliacosm, but it was less than 2 years and 9 months in the untainted land. After more than 2 years of trekking, Hongjun was no longer struggling in the 800-kilometer wide river. With a speed that was faster than a galloping horse, this was for sure. Because the closer he was to Buzhou Mountain, the more complicated the terrain was. Therefore, in the past 2 years, Hongjuan's journey was not long. It was only 500,000 kilometers. He did not even run out of the range of Luo Fan's perception with the help of the Wuji Palace. At this time, Hongjun was standing at the top of a mountain, looking at the undulating land in front of him and the magnificent mountains and rivers. His chest was filled with endless pride. At this moment, he felt that he suddenly had a new understanding of Buzhou Mountain. At the same time, there was an inexplicable confidence in his heart, filling his heart. At this time, Hongjuan's face had a lot of dust. Although a few years of trekking had brought great benefits to him, it was more obvious on the outside than on the inside. If I hadn't met Master, how could I have today? Hongjun was excited. Although he had sealed his energy for 12 years, he could feel that his state of mind had made great progress, and he felt that the energy in his body had become nearly twice as pure and condensed. If he added some of the application methods in the indomitable heaven and earth technique that he had comprehended, his strength could at least be increased by more than 3 times. This was Hongjuan's confidence. With this understanding, he was naturally more grateful to his master who had arranged this journey. Every time he found out that he had made progress, he would be grateful to his master. This had almost become his habit. Suddenly, a very strange feeling appeared in Hongjuan's mind. This feeling was like a disaster was coming. What's going on? Hongjun was surprised and uncertain. For more than a yuan hui, he had been cultivating all the time, but this strange feeling had never appeared. He, who had no experience, naturally could not imagine what was going on. After 100, what will happen after 100? Hongjun pondered in his heart. After a little calculation, he vaguely understood when the disaster would come. At this time, it happened to be the moment when Luo Fan released the yellow turban Hercules Emperor. Wuji Boy carried out Luo Fan's order to protect Hongjun and immediately passed the change of Hongjuan's mind to Luo Fan. Perceiving this change, Luo Fan's face showed a faint smile. Have you comprehended it? He moved his mind, and the Void Wuji Palace appeared above Hongjuan's head. Under the control of Wuji Boy, the Void Wuji Palace had been floating above Hongjuan's head for more than 2 years, but it was hidden, so Hongjun could not find it. After the Void Wuji Palace appeared, Luo Fan's figure flashed, and he had already left the spirit space. After leaving the Void Wuji Palace, he floated in front of Hongjun, stepping on the void, looking elegant and chic. When Hongjun saw Luo Fan appear, he was shocked and quickly bowed. Greetings, Master. Luo Fan nodded, took a step, and came to the ground in front of Hongjun. He raised his hand, and Hongjun was lifted up by an invisible force. No need to be so polite. Hongjun, my disciple, are you puzzled by the impending disaster? Luo Fan smiled slightly. That's right. Master, please dispel my doubts. Hongjun did not doubt that Luo Fan knew his thoughts. and he directly bowed to ask for advice. Chapter 45. This is predestination, also known as Heaven's Test. You have accumulated enough power now, but your realm is not enough, so you can't control your power perfectly. When you have the opportunity to break through, your power will have infinite vitality, and it will lead to the change of the power in the outside world, so it will become your predestination. If you get through it, your realm will improve greatly, and your power will increase greatly. If you can't get through it, you will die, and there will be no chance to redeem yourself, Luo Fan said calmly. Heaven's Test. Predestination. Hongjun didn't show any panic on his face. Instead, he was a little startled and stunned. After a while, he slowly clenched his fists, and his veins popped out. There was a strong sense of confidence in his eyes. I already know. I will definitely get through the Heaven's Test after 100 Ri, he said firmly as he gradually exuded a sense of heroism. Luo Fan looked at Hongjun's performance, and he was very satisfied. Although the heaven's retribution that Hongjun's strength had attracted was definitely not 1/10,000th of his, it was extremely rare for Hongjun to be able to maintain such a strong fighting spirit in the face of impending disaster. It was enough to prove how strong his will was. However, he still had to try Hongjun. Luo Fan made up his mind. I have a way to avoid this predestination. There's also a way to weaken this predestination. There's also a way to avoid this predestination. Disciple Hongjun, how are you going to survive this tribulation? Luo Fan said with a smile. I am willing to ask Master to teach me the way to resist the predestination. Hongjun didn't hesitate at all, and he said resolutely. When Luo Fan heard that, he couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect Hongjun to be so strong-willed that he didn't choose the 3 methods that he gave, but asked to teach him the way to resist the predestination. All right, since that's the case, I'll teach you a magic tool. Although the power of this magic artifact is not strong, it has the power to heal your injuries at any time. It is enough for you to survive this tribulation, said Luo Fan with a smile. As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved. A dark green light that emitted boundless vitality shot out from the Wuji Palace and landed on the ground in front of Hongjun. It gradually condensed into a shape and finally turned into an extremely strong man. It was the yellow, turbaned strongman emperor. This is the yellow, turbaned Hercules emperor. It has 36 restrictions and is only 1 step away from becoming a magic treasure. You can work hard to refine it during this period of time. If you can reach the realm of becoming one with the artifact, then you can easily overcome this tribulation, Luo Fan said. The moment he grabbed the yellow turban emperor, Luo Fan had already passed a thought to the yellow turban emperor. At this time, the yellow turban emperor did not wait for Luo Fan's instructions. It bowed to Hongjun and said, Yellow turban emperor greets master. Hongjun was slightly stunned at this moment. No matter how he looked at it, the yellow turban emperor looked like a strong man. How could he tell that it was a magic artifact? However, he did not dare to doubt what his master said. Since his master said it was a magic artifact, then it must be a magic artifact. He could not tell because he was not knowledgeable enough. Therefore, after being stunned for a while, he quickly raised his hand and said sincerely to the yellow turban emperor, I look forward to your advice. The yellow turban emperor nodded and turned into a dark green light that rushed straight to Hongjun's lower abdomen. In the blink of an eye, it entered. Seeing that the yellow turban emperor had already entered, Luo Fan raised his right hand and pointed at Hongjun. A spiritual light penetrated Hongjun's sea of consciousness and turned into countless complex words and images. It was a method to refine a magic artifact. It was very mysterious and profound. Only by using this method to refine the yellow turban emperor could one completely refine it. At the same time, an invisible force acted on various parts of Hongjun's body and easily broke the restriction that sealed his energy. In an instant, crackling sounds erupted from Hongjun's body. A wave of mysterious energy suddenly rushed out from Hongjun's lower abdomen and instantly filled every meridian in his body, filling them to the brim without any gap. Then, The energy rushed out of his meridian and out of his body through his acupuncture points. It dispersed around his body, causing his body to be shrouded in the mysterious energy and look a bit illusory. At this time, the Yellow Turban Emperor was like a dead object as it sat cross-legged in Hongjuan's lower abdomen. The rich energy around him was like an illusion. It passed through his body without any obstruction and could not affect him at all. After all, Hongjun had not refined the Yellow Turban Emperor yet. Naturally, he could not unleash its full power. It dispersed into a stream of energy that enveloped every cell and every part of his body. It was already very mysterious and special that the Yellow Turban Emperor could enter his dantian and stay there in such a situation. If it was an ordinary magic artifact, it would be impossible to enter his body before it was refined. Hongjun was in a very mysterious state at this time. Under the drive of the mysterious energy, his spirit became dazed, as if it was rising without limit. An indescribable feeling of comfort filled his mind. He had never felt his own power as directly as he did now, and he had never understood the nature of his power as clearly as he did now. Along with this feeling, an inexplicable understanding appeared in his mind. With the appearance of this understanding, he felt that his realm had improved a little. This improvement in realm also increased the purity of the energy in his body a little. The surging energy in his body gradually subsided, and Hongjuan's face gradually became calm. He slowly opened his eyes, and there seemed to be two flashes of light flashing through them. Everything calmed down, but Hongjun looked completely different from before. His body was constantly emitting strands of transparent energy. This energy accumulated and dissipated, causing his entire body to no longer have any dust or vicissitudes. Instead, he looked elegant like an immortal. "Thank you for your help, Master." Hongjun bowed and thanked him. Just now, Luo Fan's finger was pointed out when Hongjun was unprepared. It was precisely because Hongjun was unprepared that his mind suffered an even greater impact, causing his mind to be completely stunned during the process of the energy explosion. Therefore, he could use the contrast between the two extremely short states of energy abundance and energy exhaustion to comprehend, and finally improve his realm. Without your hard work over the years, there would be no progress today. Luo Fan did not take credit, but smiled and said, "Refining the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor will have 49. For the remaining time, you can sacrifice the embryo in your body, which can also increase the success rate of passing the tribulation." Hongjun bowed and replied, "Yes." Luo Fan nodded. Regardless of Hongjun, his figure flashed and went into the Wuji Palace. Hongjun did not leave. He directly sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and began to refine the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor with the technique that Luo Fan imparted to his sea of consciousness. In his dantian, the mysterious energy accumulated and wrapped the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor. The energy that wrapped the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor twisted, condensed, elongated, and entangled at an extremely fast speed. Finally, it turned into mysterious talismans that were constantly imprinted into the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor's body, passing through layers of restrictions and reaching the core. With the imprinting of these talismans, a faint connection appeared between Hongjun and the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor, making Hongjun seem to be able to feel the heart of the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor and his feelings. This connection continued to strengthen and become closer with the increase of the imprinting talismans. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, it was already 100. As Luo Fan expected, it took Hongjun a full 49 days to refine the Yellow Turban Strongman Emperor.